Okay.
It'll be more than much for them.
Welcome everybody. And we'll kick off with that karakia this morning. Mā te whakarongo, mā te kōrero, mā te nākau, mā te wairua, mā te manaki mai, mā te manaki atu, ka puawai te maramatanga, tihei, mōrei. Through listening, through talking, from the heart, from the spirit, through giving and receiving respect, understanding will bloom. This is the essence of life. Thank you. Welcome along, everybody. Welcome to Steve, and welcome to Vivuti for our first council meeting. Welcome along.
Thank you.
For anyone that doesn't know, the toilets are out the door to your right. Evacuation, please go down the stairs, not the lift. Please have our phones on silent, and these proceedings are being recorded for the purpose of live video, both live streaming and downloading. So by remaining in this meeting, you are consenting to being filmed for viewing by the public. Got quite a full agenda today. A lot of it has already been discussed in today, so hopefully we'll be able to get through those pretty quick. But aim to be out of here. We've got a couple of people wanting to go at 3 o'clock, so we've got a deadline there, so we'll aim for that. We've got apologies from Councillor Chamberlain, Graney and Menzies, who are on leave of absence, and our CEO is away today as well. Are there any further apologies? No. So I'll move from here. Second for those. Thank you, Joy. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Anyone against? It's carried. Are there any further requests for leave of absence? None. Do we have any conflict of interest for any items on the agenda today from anyone? None. We don't have any extraordinary or urgent items, and we have no minutes to confirm, and we have no public participation. So that takes us to our first report, which is on page 7 of your agenda, and I'll welcome Steve Canny up to the table to talk about the Te Anau Airport Metapori review update.
Sure, councillors, staff. Gives me great pleasure to actually update you on the developments around the airport review. I'm managing the project. There are 5 of the Great South team intimately involved in the project. We have had more to undertake certain aspects of the project at different times. We commenced our work on the 3rd of January this year. On the 3rd week of January this year, the last week in January. And we expect to complete the work on by the 31st of December 2024 of this year. The work so far has involved the completion of a review of all of the documents that sit behind the operations of the airport, including leases and other related financial matters. We completed most of the discovery work in April, and we are excluding the follow-up work which we're going through at present and have mostly completed. We commenced the consultation with the wider community and stakeholders and user groups last month, and we had 44 participants in that particular piece of work, all of whom offered very significant advice and good ideas, in fact, for the future of the airport operation. The operation has been overseen by a governance group. I won't go through that. It's as outlined there. Richard Roberts, former CEO of the Dunedin Airport, is the chairman of that group. His Worship Rob Scott, CEO Cameron McIntosh, Councillor Sarah Graney, Diane Holmes, and Fran is representing the council staff in that engagement, which has been really good. I guess in practical terms, I won't touch on who's doing what in our team, but you'll see their disciplines and so on. The focus so far has been on establishing the review framework, which was the early stage that was established back in February. Reporting frameworks, and you'll see the reporting timelines and so on there, which is operative. The financial review has been a major piece of work, identifying the operational costs, identifying the capital investment costs going forward has been critically important, and the basis upon which those capital decisions have been made or advice has been provided. That that has been tested pretty firmly, I have to say. We've been through all leases, contract agreements, and so on, and working with the council team, we are now undergoing some reviews of each of those items, and we have created some new interest in operations at the airport. The infrastructural assessments has primarily focused on the assets at the airport, the runway and apron, and all of the Three Waters infrastructure, as well as other services. We've been through the RMA as it stands, the RMA consent and operations related to the operations at the airport, and we've developed a range of avionic 3D images to support the operations and provide a more complete picture of what can and can't happen within the precincts of both the airside and landside parts of the operation. We have also looked at communications, the importance of communications across the board, and as I mentioned earlier, that program is well and truly operative as we speak. We're looking at events and additional revenue strategies, which is well underway, and development planning. What is the airport going to look like going forward? I guess in practical terms, we won't cover this off too much. I'll just touch on a few key points. We have, as I mentioned, commenced the public consultation, although we have been working with the public right from day one, but informally on the 16th of May. We are about to launch a travel patterns survey, which will involve the business community, inbound operators, as well as the local community, to understand better what their travel needs are likely to be, and that work will commence on the 24th of June, and the survey research work templates are all completed as we speak. We have started with 34 live work streams, 21 of which have now been completed, and we have 13 that are current work streams that focus specifically on the elements that we have to deliver on, critically deliver on. We have had 3 leases that we've identified that are up for renewal, and the process of renewal is happening as we speak. We have 4 new hangar interests in developing private hangars on the site, and we have 2 additional commercial interests, and we're working through these interests with the council team to ensure that we are able to, 1, fulfil that requirement, and 2, to derive the additional income that's needed to satisfy the operational needs of the airport. I guess there has been a little bit of a piece of investigation that had to be followed up on, and that was the designation relating to the airport. That's the ability for the airport to operate under its current designation, and that review has largely been undertaken, and it looks as though the designation is very firm moving forward. So third-party advice has been received around that, and council team are following up directly on that. We've also looked at water, wastewater, as I mentioned, runway investment earlier, and it seems to us that there are significant ways in which that needs to be modified, and we've suggested some techniques and methods to try and sharpen up on some of the placement of capital into that asset, and also the way in which we review and monitor the operations or the deterioration or condition of the runway. At this stage, we've identified $495,000 worth of savings in that area alone, and we have identified a number of other areas of savings, and that will all help to balance the books effectively, and that's really the key objective of this piece of work. We have undertaken spatial plans, so we've looked at the geology of the site, the hydrogeology of the site. We've looked at the obstacle exclusion zones, so how high can a building be in a certain designated area. All of that activity now is all properly planned and mapped. And it's not that it hasn't been, it's just that it's been static previously. We have now three-dimensional images of that. We are consulting with iwi on a number of matters relating to the airport, including some matters relating to the title and designation. I guess in conclusion, from our team's perspective, we see this as a quality asset. It's a relatively young asset. There is a need, a very clear need, and we have been engaging with other airport operators in the South Island and elsewhere actually for jet parking, and that's a possibility that we're working on at present. There is a need for short-haul aircraft, increasing need for short-haul aircraft into areas like Southland. It's a main gateway into southern New Zealand, of course, Southland, I should say, and we are looking at the ability to ultimately service electric personalised travel and hydrogen aircraft from that site. Although this is more provision rather than setting up a system to do that immediately. It's more the ability to do it rather than the ability to invest in that. We have, as I mentioned, lease interests. All of those lease interests are now up for advancement. I think the phrase that's been used by the governance group is that we're open for business, and that's a big change, and that's very positive from our point of view, and also I think from the operational perspective. Our ultimate objective is to actually have a long-term operational plan that makes good fiscal sense and provides the governance oversight that enables the airport operations to be more responsive and able to satisfy not only the user needs but also to look at other opportunities. And that piece of work really has commenced now, but that will be completed and presented to Council at the 25th, by the 25th of November this year. Our main communications, as I mentioned earlier, have been with user groups, stakeholders, those that have taken an active interest, the Southland Community Board, who I must say have been very supportive, and of course Council. So our team have worked very closely with the Council team. That has been really, really good. One of the really significant risks around these sort of projects is delay in providing information and background. But we've had requests, as soon as the requests have been out with the team, they've followed up really quickly, and we've been able to really satisfy our need for information and also to develop forward plans for these activities. Now, there are a number of development opportunities that we have working through at present, and we have a draft preliminary plan for some of those activities, but it's a little premature to share that at this point until some of the stakeholders, in fact, have committed their side of their side of future agreements. So that's it in a summary. I'm not sure if there's any questions. Very happy to answer questions if you have any, please. By the way, I have been involved in developing a few airports in my past life, I have to say, and I'm very close to the aviation industry and the development of hydrogen-based aviation transport. So, in another role that I currently fulfil. Yeah.
Thanks for that, Steve, and I'd like to acknowledge the work of yourself and your team. It's been a very, very good process to be involved in, and also the governance group, Richard, and especially Sarah and Diane. They've put a lot of hours into this, and the whole community-led component of it, I think, is going to be a factor in the success. It's been very heavily focused around that community, and I attended that consultation a few weeks ago now, but it was a very successful one. It was good to see people really comfortable with where the process was gone, so all credit to everyone involved. Do we have any questions from the floor for Councillor Duffy?
Yeah, well, probably a silly one, but you're mentioning the hydrogen, Steve, so the investment you were talking about will be to provide refuelling, I suppose, is it? Or
I think the key thing is that these smaller airports have a greater role in personalised travel and small short-haul aircraft travel, you know. And so you've got to accommodate, and most of the small airports, for example, in the US, are adopting this type of approach. We have been in contact with a number of US and Canadian operators to get a litmus test of their particular approach, because particularly in Canada, a lot of these technologies are quite well advanced now. And it's really having an awareness of the changing needs and having the ability at some point in the future to service that. And it would be typically through fuel, through high voltage supplies for electric aircraft recharging. It's not that you would want to put that in at this point because that becomes a cost and you wouldn't have a revenue stream, but having the ability to have ducted supplies and suitably located areas within the footprint of the airport available for that type of activity, including the possibility of extended aprons and so on, to accommodate those sort of services is fundamental to the success of any future operation. I think one of the really stark realities, unfortunately, also is that the airport is really a critically important location for emergency services in and out of Fiordland, during civil emergency or other disasters. That has been exercised, as we all know, in February 2020, and a lot of people were I wouldn't say, were basically stuck in Milford Sound, and so I won't go into that, but that's an important aspect of the operation as well. Yeah.
So the investment in hydrogen might happen, but provision for it is really what you're talking about.
That's what I'm saying. Yes. Yeah. A lot of what we put down in this master plan will be about how to provision those things when the time is right, but there will be some immediate actions that need to be implemented to try and ensure that you have the revenue streams that are needed to satisfy the operation, and a range of other actions that are necessary to be addressed in the future operation of the airport. Yeah.
Thanks.
That's a vote, right?
Thank you. Thank you, Steve. I was just wondering, I had the chair of the Fiordland Community Board, Diane, speak at our community board, the Wallace Takitimu, and she mentioned that time in response to a question that how can we be sure that we are not duplicating work that's already being done, say under the Milford Opportunities Project and others. And she said by the end of the month, there'll be more details, because getting the airport up and running and getting more flights there was also going to be part of their plan.
It is. Yep.
So where is the collaboration there? I just wonder how well is the ratepayer money being spent here doing this as a standalone piece?
Well, I think first of all, what we've been asked to do is take an objective view of the existing operation and recommend, and that's involved a very detailed piece of work. And the second part is looking at the opportunities. And the opportunities associated with that are increased direct landings, scheduled flights, etc., etc. So as part of that process, any Milford Opportunities work that's been undertaken, which is not clearly visible at this point, will be brought into that, and that's the third phase of the work that we're embarking on. Yep.
So in the phase after this, you will be liaising with that project?
Yes. Yep. Right. Yep. Yeah, we didn't want to dive into the solutions right at the start, because we wanted to have an open and objective view of the opportunities, rather than being directed by ideas at that point. So we've taken that approach. We think that it provides the best original response, and we have had, as His Worship will attest to, we've had a lot of people in the public consultation come through with good ideas, and so we're taking those on board. Not all of which will be obviously implemented. They won't be lost, but they won't necessarily be implemented at this point. But that part of Milford Opportunities and so on would get considered. And I guess in practical terms, our team have also been intimately involved in some of the work in at Milford Sound, and some of the opportunities that may result ultimately from that activity could be of benefit to the airport operation as well. Yeah. So we're not blind to the possibilities.
Yeah. Thank you.
That's no problem.
Through you, Your Worship. Morning, Steve. Thank you for this. 18 months ago, when I first stepped into that airport for the first time, this is a wonderful asset, but I was disheartened up until that point about where we were going. The consultation process between then and now, by the sounds of it, and with this report, has been pretty robust, which is heartening. So well done on that. And I suppose I spoke to Diane Holmes last week when she reported to our community board as well. And this is a regionally strategic.
So sorry.
This is a regionally strategic asset.
Yes.
and it was my feeling towards Diane that we need to treat it that way with regards to how we are rated. So I feel that this is a district-wide rateable asset that we need to look at rather than a targeted one.
Yes.
Within your report, will you have enough, I suppose, evidence or supporting documentation to support that this should be a district-wide rated asset?
What we will be doing is looking at all of the options to, one, make the operation more fiscally sound. In the first instance, there's no question whatsoever that Milford Sound and Fiordland generally is a gateway into Southland. The dispersal via the Southern Scenic Route, for example, and into Eastern Southland, Catlins and so on is critically important. It's a gateway. It's a natural point of dispersion. So yes, we'll be putting every on the table, including the greater regional impacts.
I guess it's important to reflect as well that part of our NDP consultation and that process will happen before the report comes out. So yeah, it's a bit of a so we'll be making that decision prior to that report.
Sure.
Yep.
Through you, Worship. Within the strategy, has there been any consultation or discussion between our neighbouring RTOs, so within the Queenstown Lakes region, where obviously the market with the private jet side of things, they're running out of room, it's costing a lot of money. Depending on who you talk to up there, they're saying we would welcome Manapori to take the overflow of those particular aircraft, and could that create an opportunity for us versus someone else saying, well, no, we don't believe that's the case and we can handle it, what we can handle up here. Do you have any comments around that?
Yes, I do. Well, first of all, I have to say that all of the airports that we have, and after our initial investigation work, we have reached out to a number of airport operators, and without exception, they have been open and willing to support us in the investigation and council in this investigation. There has been specifically an interest in overflow of small private-owned jets into Fiordland, and so we're really just canvassing the various possibilities as we speak. Yep. So in answer to your question, we haven't completed that work yet, but the initial indications are very positive for collaboration.
Thanks very much for that, Steve. So we've got a recommendation here that we receive the report titled Great South Update to Council on the Te Anau Airport Manapori Review Update. And I'm just going to suggest a B, which should be behind my head, that we thank the Great South Project Group and the Governance Group for their work to date on the review. I'll move that to the chair. Is someone in a position to second? Thank you, Councillor. All those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Anyone against? That's carried. Thank you once again, Steve. Appreciate it. Okay, so our second item today is the draft risk management policy adoption, which is on page 13 of your agenda, and I'll invite Jane up to the table to speak to this one.
Thank you. Good morning, Your Worship. Good morning, councillors. Following endorsement from the Finance and Assurance Committee earlier this month, this report presents the draft risk management policy for adoption by Council. The draft presented today has been developed to state at a high level Council's approach to managing risk, and it will be supported by the methodology and guidance outlined in the risk management framework. You'll note that the draft has had one change since it was last presented, and that is the addition of a glossary section in response to feedback from the committee. So today staff are seeking that the policy be adopted and to come into effect at the start of the financial year. So thank you. Happy to answer any questions you might have.
Thank you for that, Jane. If we've got any questions, we had a good debate in this not so long ago, so I imagine this will be a fairly easy one to get through.
No, I'm sorry, Rob.
Yep, Councillor Rundle.
Through you, Rob. Yes, for your report, Jane. Engagement with stakeholders.
Yes.
So with the community and the risk management process, how do we ensure we engage with the community? Just to get any perspectives around the risk management policy.
With the community, this is largely an internal focused approach. This is how we are managing the risks that might impact us achieving our strategic objectives. And engagement with the community is obviously a mitigation, is an approach we will use to ensure we have, for example, we're talking social licence going forward. That is just part of the way in which we will treat that risk. So in terms of taking this out to the community, this is not for community focus, it's for governance.
Okay, thank you so much.
Councillor Duffy?
Oh, it's just a typo on page 34, on that number 2, under environmental, it's got climatic, there's an extra C in there.
Thank you very much. Thank you. I'll make note of that.
You put an R in, it could be Arctic. It's climatic.
Cool. So I've added a new E on hopefully behind my head again, that we just delegate the authority to the Chief Executive and myself to make any minor changes like Councillor Duffy's just pointed out. So do we have someone in a position to move through E? Thank you, Councillor Fraser. Councillor Duffy. All those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Anyone against? That's carried. Dane?
Thank you.
I think you're probably staying there for the next one.
I'm staying here for the next one.
So
Yep.
that's the Risk Management Annual Review, which is on page 37 of your agenda. So, over to you.
Thank you. So the purpose of this report is to seek adoption of Council's priority strategic risks for the next reporting year. So these risks have been subject to review by the Executive Leadership Team and they're presented and endorsed by the Finance and Insurance Committee on 5th of June. So the proposed risks are included with the report and are intended to become operational 1st of July if adopted. So I'm happy to answer any further questions you might have on these top strategic risks.
Once again, discussed at length in our last meeting. So, Councillor Byers.
Thank you, Your Worship. Thank you, Jane. Just the order of priority on that strategic risk areas. We've got the first priority, adverse event. Risk the council's unable to respond to consequences of natural or human impact. And further down the list, round number 6, we've got finance risks that the council fails to manage its financial sustainability. And bearing in mind that we've got a long-term plan out at the moment in which we're planning to borrow up to the maximum amount that we're allowed to borrow under current rules. So there'll be no headroom at the end of the 10-year period to manage adverse events. So I'm wondering if this finance aspect needs to be up there with the adverse events, given that that's how we would respond.
If I could just, through Your Worship, the risks aren't prioritised. They're not in a prioritised order. They're going to be presented exactly the same as they have done today. As a holistic risk register, you'll receive them as a dashboard. There is no one risk that is highlighted as more important than the other, but you'll see in terms of how we report on them each quarter, in terms of where we are highlighting that there may be something of priority that we need focus from governance on. So finance, I appreciate your point. This is one of our highest risks, which is why it has emerged on the risk register for this year as part of the review. So we're certainly highlighting that as of priority to council, but they are purely arranged in alphabetical order at the moment for adoption.
I was just going to say that they're in alphabetical order.
Yeah,
So,
sorry, there you go.
oh, that's right. Thanks, Jane. No, obviously I misunderstood priority strategic risk. I thought that was prioritising it.
No,
Well, I'm pleased to see it's on there. Thank
it's
you.
on there. Yes.
Yeah, I think it'll be very hard to actually prioritise the risks because any one of them coming will be
Yes.
a high priority in itself. Is there any further questions? There being none, I'll take us to our recommendations and just noting that D, we've got each of the Roman numerals, aren't they? Good. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 of them. And unless there's an indication that anyone's got a problem with one of them, I'll put them all together at the same time. There's lots of nodding. Is that Councillor Byers here?
Well, I wonder if number 6 could include the oh, sorry. Look, that does include the ability to fund, but it's essential services and projects, and I suppose that covers the ability to respond to natural disasters.
So do we have a mover for A through to D? Seconder, Councillor Ravenclaw. And if there's no further discussion, all those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Anyone against? That's carried. Thank you. Right, so our next item is our fraud policy adoption, on page 43 of your agenda, and I'll welcome Anna Brenner to the table, and Chris as well. I think it's your first meeting too, Anna, so welcome.
Thank you, Your Worship and Councillors. I thought before we start it might be a good idea to introduce you to Anna. Anna Bremer has recently joined the organisational policy team as our senior policy analyst. She has a wealth of experience both in central and local government, and with most recently as lead for MBIE's Regional Skills Leadership Group. Today, Anna is finishing the review process for our fraud policy, which Teresa recently took past the Finance and Assurance Committee. So now I'll just leave the floor with Anna.
Thank you.
Thanks, Chris. Tēnā koe, Your Worship. Tēnā koutou elected members. So, as Chris already mentioned, I'm here today to present the fraud policy for consideration and adoption. So the fraud policy provides a framework to protect council's revenue, property, information and other assets from any attempt to gain financial or other benefits by deceit. The current policy was extensively reviewed in 2021 by Copeland Ashcroft Law, and council's fraud control officers have confirmed that the policy is working well. So during the current review, there have been changes required to include Audit New Zealand recommendations for bribery and corruption definitions, as well as further responsibility for the fraud control officers around bribery and corruption. So the Finance and Assurance Committee at their meeting on the 5th of June recommended that Council adopt the draft policy subject to amendments to the protected disclosures information. These amendments were to show the relationship between reporting fraud and reporting serious wrongdoing through a protected disclosure process, and these have been included in the draft policy. So I'll now pass this back to the Mayor and Council.
We've got any questions?
You did.
We read through this before for Finance and Insurance. Just having another read through last night, I did make a note on page 51, so page 5 of the attachment. It talks about the plan requiring people to report instances of suspected fraud to a fraud control officer, and it's got the two roles there, or if this is not appropriate, the Chief Executive, the Chair of the F&A Committee, or the Mayor. In the preamble to that, it also mentions or directly to the Serious Fraud Office. So I'm just wondering, in those next two steps, is there a missing paragraph of if that second option isn't appropriate? At what point do you basically use that Serious Fraud Office email if it's not appropriate for those other two bullet points? So it's got I'm not sure who I'm directing this question to. It's just kind of food for thought. So
through you, Your Worship, do you mean that perhaps we could change the actual formatting of the way that the policy is presented so that it has the contact emails of the fraud control and the Serious Fraud Office as a separate paragraph as in the next step in the line? Or are you saying that perhaps in the instance of a protected disclosure and you wanted to contact the Serious Fraud Office directly in relation to fraud?
Yeah, I guess it's just saying that it's laying out what the plan requires. These are the people you report to, or if this is not appropriate, report here. It doesn't give advice on at what point you'd use that serious fraud email. So just trying to internalise it myself, there's not, in terms of the obligation to report suspected fraud, there's not any instruction on at what point to apply that Serious Fraud Office comment of reporting directly to the Serious Fraud Office through that email. That's in the contact email. So I just wondered if another bullet point following or if this is not appropriate to the Chief Executive, the Chair of the Finance and Assurance Committee, or the Mayor. The next one would be, or if this is not appropriate, then that's when you'd be going to Serious Fraud Office, I guess. I'm just wondering if another insert is...
Through your worship, I think if you're talking about escalating to serious fraud by sidestepping those other processes, I feel that's where we're stepping into protected disclosure category, rather than it being an escalation through management channels to serious fraud. So if you're thinking it's a way of escalating that by bypassing, then I feel that the protected disclosures policy would be able to adequately address that approach.
So that's another policy?
It's a separate policy which is currently being reviewed as well. So we can make that a note of that review to ensure that that is included there.
Because this policy is essentially for staff and elected members, so this would also apply to councillors?
Staff.
This is only for staff, so not for elected members.
If I may add something, what I am getting from this is, would there be some protocol that's going to be breached if an escalation is directly made to serious fraud office instead of first going to within? I mean, is there some chain of command that we want to speak to? I mean, would that employee say, whosoever does it, would they be, suppose it happens and from SFO it comes back down and they might be told, likely you didn't go about this the right way?
Through your worship, if the protected disclosures policy is followed, then if serious wrongdoing has occurred in relation to that fraud and it is being escalated, that escalation can occur directly without going through internal channels.
So should SFO be removed from this then? And this just kept for...
I think it's still relevant where management determines that serious fraud needs to be escalated through going through those management processes.
I'm just going back to first page of the policy under scope. The policy applies to all council employees. For the purpose of this policy, council employees are council staff, elected members, contractors or volunteers working for council. So if I'm taking this from an elected member point of view, I get to the obligation of report suspected fraud. So hypothetically, if there's a suspected fraud and I enact this policy to guide where I go with that information, the plan would require me to go to these two general management roles, or if not appropriate, the CEO, the F&A committee chair, or the mayor. But then the next step would be, or if none of those are appropriate, then the serious fraud.
So through your worship, what I'm hearing is that you would like another set of bullet points that says, or if not appropriate to the serious fraud office.
Because it's referred to in the paragraph 4 and it's got the contact email there, but it doesn't give any instruction on when to bring that in. So that's just nitpicking through it. Yeah, that's right.
Would it be preferable to leave this on the table for just till after morning tea to give you a bit of time to have a look at the potential changes on that? Would that give you a bit of time to?
It would save us coming back to council and on another day.
So I'll adjourn this item for now, and then we'll come back to it after morning tea, and then.
And we can think of wording and suggest an additional resolution to reflect that. Yep.
Absolutely.
Are there any other questions just before I adjourn it, not related to that point? Cool. Well, I'll adjourn that one. Do I need to move a second?
No, at this point.
Cool. Perfect.
So we're going on to
Thank you.
So that takes us up to 7.5, which is our rate remission and postponement policy adoption.
and Matt.
Adopting some policies today. Well, so this is on page 55 of your agenda. Another one that's been talked about before. We'll come through it.
Your Worship and councillors. So this policy is obviously coming to council after you considered submissions and deliberated those on the 5th of June. That meeting recommended no change be made to the policy, but did note that the suggestions about providing remission for heritage buildings be considered more in terms of a heritage fund and dealt with through the LTP process. So basically we're bringing the policy back today for council to endorse it. And just to recap, this is the policy that covers the instances where council wishes to either reduce rates or postpone the payment of rates, is what this policy deals with. We did put 2 new things in there this year, which was a remission for water rates and also a remission for non-contiguous properties that are adjoining council or Crown land. Any questions? Yeah.
Anyone have any questions? Hearing none. Oh, yep, sorry. There being 3. Councillor Byers, Councillor Duffy, Councillor Fraser.
Thank you, Your Worship. I'm just wondering, thanks Nicole, the page 56, number 12, remissions if there's a water leak and there's the use of water meters associated with water meters. Are the water meters being used in the
In
district?
some instances, mainly in trade, for trade or large commercial users, we use water meters.
Okay.
In some towns, I'm not entirely sure about the rollout of that, but yeah.
Well, I'm wondering about Winton, because it sounds like there's a lot of water leaks over there. Does anyone know if there's water meters over there? There's
Would
significant.
generally be limited, I think, to larger commercial users or instances where they know that they're trying to find problems with water. It might have been something that came up through the LTP asset management planning. The guys might have talked about demand management and where we are at in terms of our use of meters, but I wasn't in those meetings, so I don't know what scope there was.
Okay, no, that's fine. Thank you.
Councillor Duffy?
Yeah, well, something I've sort of gone on about before, but it's the non-contiguous rural property thing. And I'm talking about really where it could be contiguous. In the case of a dairy farm, where the adjoining land is not dairy as such, it's runoff, farmed as pastoral, yet it's captured under the dairy rate as a dairy, and I don't believe that's fair. And it's partly because of the amalgamation of everything into one thing.
It's a different issue, so yeah, so we've had a consistent rule that whatever the value is that's provided by the valuer, whatever the rating land use is, that generally that will be how we can arrange it. In the LTP process, we are making one slight change to that through the forestry indigenous protected. We're changing them from the forestry category, but that's the only exception to that rule. So where you've got a rating land use that says dairy or pastoral, then that gets used.
Yeah, well, I think it's grossly unfair.
Was there any changes you wanted to propose to that?
Oh, change I'd love, but I think you've got to start with the valuation place. They should have the ability to split land off if it's a different use.
Council could, if they chose to, look at a remission for that instance, if they wanted to partially remit the rates at the lower, whatever the agreed main use was, but that's something that we would need to put in the next consultation round.
So you couldn't do that inside this policy?
Not at the moment. You could do that in this policy, but not right now. Yeah, we would need to do consultation on that change.
There's not a lot of cases of it, but it still happens.
Councillor Fraser?
No, I didn't have a question.
This is probably a really silly question. Does unformed road reserve count as council land?
I would have to seek advice. I wouldn't know the status of it.
So paper roads essentially?
Yeah. It was essentially a property at one end of a street, to the other end of the street. If it's joined by a road, I don't know.
I think it's council property and there's lease arrangements, and if a farmer or someone is using that land.
It could be contiguous between the property if it's separated by a paper road and there's another bit of land at the back.
If it's separated by road, it's still contiguous. So the legislation is really clear that if you've got 2 properties and they're separated by a road or a river or something else, that it can still be treated as contiguous.
Is there a threshold for that though? Because that's, my mind's just kind of gone this weird place of essentially if you have a property at one end of the street and another property at the other end of the street, it's connected, adjacent.
No, so you can't treat the road reserve as the thing that's making it contiguous, no.
Okay. Only if it's directly adjacent.
Yeah.
That makes
sense. Or sitting next to each other.
Thanks for that.
Councillor Keys?
Thank you, Worship, and it's probably been in the policy forever, but on page 65, 1.6, remission of rubbish and recycling. Is that for if someone chooses not to have a rubbish bin.
So it's only, my understanding is normally Shelley would be here with me, but she's ditched out on me, but would be normally when there's, oh no, she's there. Multiple bins. So if you're in a wheelie bin area and you have to get a bin, then you will pay for the bin if you're in the area, in the compulsory supply area, but it's where you opt to have additional bins or you're a voluntary person who opts to have additional bins. So at the point which you give that additional bin back or that optional bin back, it's the remission for the remainder of the year for that.
So in the case of if someone's property is, it doesn't matter whether it's rural or residential, if they're on the route, they all get charged the bin fee?
Generally, I believe it's only the people within the urban areas that are compulsory. I think on the route and you're rural, that's an optional if you wish to do that.
And I could possibly vote for that, because we, at the farm we were on, we asked for a bin, additional 350 or some such charge was added under STC area, so it wasn't being charged.
Yeah, so you opted into the service.
Opted in, yeah.
Thank you for that clarification.
I think there's instances where perhaps a house burns down and we would remit collections till a new one's built or something too.
Yeah, that's correct.
Any further questions? Then, do we have someone in a position to move recommendations and a new E up there as well, which is just adding on if there's any minor changes? Councillor Baker, second Councillor Spraggan. I'll put the motion. All those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Anyone against? That is carried. Might be a good time to, although if Nicole's still sitting there, shall we go on to the next one?
That'd be good.
Yeah.
So this is the revenue and financing policy adoption, again from F&A last time, page 99 of your agenda.
So similar to the other property, so council considered the submissions and feedback we had on this policy on the 5th of June. At that meeting, staff recommended that we make an amendment to this policy to include development financial contributions as a funding source for stormwater, and that is now being reflected in the remainder of the document. The other thing to note in this is that there's one aspect of this policy that we can't confirm yet, and that's the funding of the Tianao Airport. So that's going through the LTP process. So you'll see in the policy that that's still very much got all the options in there. And so once we make a deliberation on that, we will update this policy to reflect that decision. If you do also make other changes as part of the LTP deliberations that are not in line with this policy as it currently stands, then we will also need to consider the significance of those decisions in the LTP and whether we can incorporate them in the policy or not. We should be able to, because the policy is quite broad. So, yeah, that's pretty much what I wanted to say. Yeah, it's here for your adoption.
So will it come up again as to be adopted as part of the LTP, or are we adopting it now to include that part from the LTP?
So you're adopting it now with an effective implementation of the LTP date, right? And we will bring a second report back that will finalise it with the airport options in to confirm the adoption of that with that change.
Are there any questions for Nicole? Councillor Keast?
Thank you, Worship. The page 107. Providing the ability to use general rate funding to assist communities, their e.g. airport and water structure funding on Stewart Island, Rekiora. Are we talking about the airport at Stewart Island there, or is it airport?
It's Tianao Airport, it should be.
Yeah, so it probably means, it sounds like you're talking about the, I mean, it's probably, but yeah, we need to be clear that we're not talking about the airport at Stewart Island.
Yeah, no, I'll make that clear.
Councillor Baker?
Thank you, Rob. Point number 16, just highlighting the fact that our comms are probably definitely not on point, seeing that we've just received feedback from 4 submitters. 2 indicated this is page 101. 2 submitters indicated it did not support the policy, made general comments relating to the level of council rates and bureaucracy. 1 supported as drafted with another submitter. Not getting the traction that we need with our comms on this one. On most of these, but yeah, when you get submissions from 4 people, it's hard to get a direction which way to go to.
Yeah, I believe we discussed this quite extensively at the prior.
And I believe it's worth highlighting it again that the comms are not really on point if this is what we are getting here. I mean, I have my own issues with the policy relating to the roading rates and others. But yeah, we definitely need to do better on this one.
I think part of it as well is it might not necessarily be the comms. It's if you say something that people aren't happy about, they'll quite often come in droves to comment as well. So it's a bit of a mix, I think, between. I mean, I'm not saying that we're assuming that there's saying nothing is approving, but I guess that kind of happens by default. But it's normally it's difficult to get people to come and talk about these kind of almost mundane pieces if it doesn't necessarily affect them. Sorry, Anne.
And yet, this is probably the most crucial bit that feeds into the LTP. How are we going to be funding all of it? So I think most people think that once they submit on the LTP, this is done here.
So I guess it's how we frame the story of how the LTP fits together.
Fits into this.
I mean, one thing, if council, like the best thing to do is not necessarily the consultation once you've done all the work, but talk to people in the development of the policy. If you want engagement, if you want healing, that it might be better to do that as part of the working up of the policy and feeding into any draft policy in the future, as opposed to waiting till council's
finalise it.
If there's a desire to engage more on how we fund.
Any further answers?
I think you wish it probably just more of a commentary that probably we get more feedback on this when it's actually done in conjunction with the long-term plan. And so as a standalone document, it doesn't, people might not have seen the relevance, whereas they would see, the long-term plan issues are where they focus their attention rather than the policy in behind it.
The difficulty this year is we had another legislative timeline that we had to meet. Also, last time we did have some issues that we were doing in terms of changing how we were doing our rating, which was of more interest to people, so we received more submissions on that. They could understand it more, probably.
What are the nuances being tied into legislative frameworks and trying to sort of fit it all in? Councillor Byers?
Thank you, Your Worship. Nicole, could you mentioned that Piano Airport and allowances for different rating options in this policy. Could you just highlight in there where the relevant bits are for that?
So the section that Councillor Case is talking about where we allow to make adjustments as part of our Step 2 considerations. We've got these legislative considerations on Step 1 under Section 101 of the Local Government Act. And so making adjustments is where we can choose to fund things differently than we would on a benefit basis. And all of that decision making is made in Section 3.2.2 of the policy, which is where the tables are in their back. So we're documenting the steps for those, and I just have to work out where the airport would be.
112.
The airport is under transport.
112 is what I'm looking at.
So you can see in there, so we consider the community outcomes, the distribution of benefits to the whole community, the identical parts, individuals, who creates the need, the period of benefit, the cost and benefits of separate funding, and then we make our funding choice assessment. So that's when that discussion is occurring on how we're going to fund this activity. And you can see in there for this, because we haven't made that decision, we've included all the options.
Okay, well, not completely wrapped on. I think it would be much tidier to wait until after we received the submissions, wouldn't we? But
we have a legislative obligation to adopt this policy before the 1st of July in relation to another amendment that was made to the Act around Te Ture Whenua Māori Act, Amendment Act. So that's why we're adopting the policy in order to meet that timeframe. And we've been quite clear in our material to say that this part of the policy can't be confirmed until the LTP is included. It is odd, but unfortunately when they did the Water Services Entity Bill, they didn't think about this policy, so we've got a legislative timeframe to meet.
Few oddities with that delay in the long-term plan, because normally that LTP would be going through now and we'd be doing the whole thing in one piece. So that's a couple of little, I guess, unintended consequences of that change that was made.
Some councils do opt to have the discussion about this policy quite separate to LTP, because it is very much a principle theory, applying the principles about how these things should be funded, and then they may revisit them as part of the LTP, but they do choose to do them separately to put a purist lens over the funding decisions.
Brian, did you have another question?
Thank you, Your Worship. Nicole, could you please confirm how much of our total rates we can take? Is it 30% via the UAGC?
So, yeah. So it's the legislative requirement is about rates that are set across the whole district on a fixed basis or across a group of ratepayers on a fixed basis. So it's 30%. Now, because we have some of our rates that are on differentials, like take the community board rate, it's on a the urban people pay a full charge, the semi-urban pay a half charge, and the rural pay a quarter charge. That doesn't get included in the 30%, calculation. However, all of those in a hall rating area, because they all pay the same, that does get included in the 30%. So that's the legal advice on it. So at the moment, under the legal advice, we're around 21% of our rates are collected. However, when you just look at the rates that we set on a fixed basis and not worry about the legal interpretation, including service rates, we're at about 50% of our rates are set on a fixed basis. But that does include the service rates, which make up around 24%.
So to go very technical on this, the 30% that we are required, that we can go up to fund by UAGC, we are at 21%.
Yes. So, and that's the UAGC, that's our hall rates, that's our...
So we have about half, say 21 to 30%, ballpark 10%. There is some ceiling there right now.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. But it's, like I said, it's based on the legal interpretation of what a fixed charge would be, basically.
Right.
So we have some fixed charges that we get charged that are not included in that calculation because they have a differential within them.
But as such, as it stands right now, we do have a 9% ceiling available. Thank you.
Cool. Thank you for that, Nicole. So we've got our recommendation there on page. We adopt the final revenue policy 2024 as shown in attachment A, which will come into effect on the date of the adoption of the long-term plan.
And we've just got one amendment from Councillor Keast. Yeah. Just one amendment from Councillor Keast.
That airport one on page 107, I think. So if we've got the
That's
F
just
up there,
that's covered by
that'll be covered under F. Do we have a councillor in a position to move those recommendations? Councillor Keast, seconded by Councillor Fraser. There's no further discussion. I'll put the motion. All those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Anyone against? Councillor Baker.
Yeah, I stand with the fact that I'm not convinced with the roading rate plus the UAGC. Our own policy states that council may use the UAGC to balance the impact of high fixed charges on those on low incomes and property values against the impact of a low UAGC on their relative share of rates levied on high value properties such as large rural ones. I do think, this is not a role we should be playing. We should be taking the maximum UAGC. It's not kept up with inflation. Between that and the roading, it's a no from me.
Do you want that noted as well?
Did the dissenting vote reported?
Yes, please.
Well, that is carried. Thank you, Nicole. Might be a good chance to have a break for morning tea now before the next one, so we'll come back at 11:10. And just putting in that E underneath as well, if there's any further minor amendments that can be made, we'll have to bring them back to are you comfortable with that, Councillor Wilson? Happy to move? Do we have a seconder? Councillor Fraser? There's no further discussion. Comfortable, Councillor O'Brien?
I'm just reading.
I'll put the motion. All those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Anyone against? That is carried. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. We'll move forward now to item 7.7, which is the significance and engagement policy, which is on page 161 of your agenda. Louise and Vibhuti. So welcome along, Vibhuti. I know Cameron is very pleased to have the executive leadership team all complete now with both. So welcome along.
Thank you, Worship. And just before we start on that, I'd just like to briefly introduce myself. So, tēnā koutou katoa, ko Vibhuti Chopra Tokuringa. My name is Vibhuti. like Your Worship mentioned, I'm the new GM Strategy and Partnerships, and I come from Wellington. So, in New Zealand we call Hamilton home. That's where we first came about 23 odd years ago. And the length of my career, 23 years in New Zealand, has been in local government. So I'm well versed in local government, and I'm really glad to be here. I'm very happy to be part of Southland. It's a little bit colder than Wellington, but not much different actually. Stone Island, on the other hand, might be slightly different. I was there yesterday and it was absolutely freezing, so that beanie was well used. But thank you very much for having me here, and thank you, Bishop.
And she certainly made a very good start with Stewart Island, with giving us some actually positive news yesterday. So you got off on the right foot.
Right, I rehearsed well. So thank you, Worship. Through you, back to the report here. I am going to hand over to Louise, but you know this is part of your process. You have to do the significance and engagement policy, and more than anything, it is guidance to yourselves and guidance to the community around what is significant and how we'll engage on that topic. There is a minor amendment that I will just suggest right up front. You know you're adopting it before you're adopting your LTP, and it says in the report that the implementation of the policy will be once you adopt your long-term plan. The policy itself says it will be implemented with immediate effect. So with your leave, Your Worship, we'll just make that amendment in the policy to say it will be effective as of the adoption of the LTP. And I'll pass on to you, Louise.
Good morning, Your Worship and councillors. I will take the report as read, but we'll just highlight the key changes based on the submissions and discussion on the 5th of June. Firstly, the iwi section has been moved further up in the policy to highlight councils and mana whenua partnership as requested by Te Ao Marama. Some of the language has also been adapted by using material from the Otago Regional Council's significance and engagement policy, again as suggested by Te Ao Marama. Secondly, the policy's purpose now is exactly what is in the Local Government Act in Section 76, rather than the previous summary. This was requested by Federated Farmers, who also asked for a definitions table. This has been added in and is found in the appendices. Happy to take any questions.
Thanks, Louise. And I guess this is an important process. It goes to show that the submissions actually get heard and do make changes. So, yeah, I think most, if not all, of the submissions have had an impact on this.
They have.
Any questions from the table? Looks like questions. So if there are no questions, I'll take us through the recommendations on page 164. And we've put the referred to as a get out of jail free card as the new E, just any further minor changes to be delegated to the Chief Executive and myself. Bit of irony in recommendation B that we determined that it's not significant. So if we change that one, we'd have to change the policy. It would go around in the infinite loop. But do we have someone in a position to move? Councillor Ruttenclaw, seconded. Councillor Keast. If there is no further discussion, I'll put the motion. All those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Anybody against? That is carried. Thank you. Thank you. Rightio. On to, we wanted to jinx it, but we're moving along quite quickly today.
Oh, you did that last
7.8, the adoption of the Southland District Council fees and charges and end of year rate penalty. So another process that needs to be done by the end of the financial year or the start of the financial year. I'll hand over to Shelley. Page 183.
Thank you, Your Worship, councillors. So, yep, this report is to present the fees and charges schedule for the financial year to start at 1st of July 24 for the council to adopt and to set the financial year-end rate penalty to be applied on the 1st of July. The fees and charges are usually done as part of the annual plan and the LTP process, so just with the delay, I'm bringing this report in separately. to recommend council to set those fees from 1st of July, just so we can hit some of our budget revenue requirements rather than the delay of a couple of months. The fees and charges that council set must be fair and reasonable, not be more than the cost incurred by council in providing the services and goods. The draft lifts did come up to council on the 29th of May and showed the increases in some of the activities there to meet the costs. The end of year rates penalty, again, that normally gets adopted as part of the rates resolution, but with the delay, that's going to come in August. So I just wanted to bring this one. Council does have a choice to do it on the 1st of July or 5 days after the resolution is set, which could be done in August, but that sort of has delays to your following up on your revenue of the rates from the previous year and all the processes that we have in place to make sure we get timings of that sort of stuff all sorted out. So just wanted to bring that forward so we could set the penalties on the 1st of July this year and carry on with those processes.
Just a question from me in terms of the airport review that's being done. So if that comes out with a recommendation to change because I see it's got the airport landing fees and those sorts of things in there, do we have to wait for an annual planning process to make changes to that, or can we do that as a special resolution?
No, so the fees and charges, there's no proposed change to the actual individual fees of that, but you can do it again in August when you set the LTP.
Could we do it in February next year though, or do we have to wait until the actual annual plan process to do that? If it falls outside of, that's for the fees and charges, are they locked into an annual plan cycle?
Not necessarily. They can be done outside of it. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Duff?
The halls that are here, they're just the council-owned ones, are they?
Yes, they are.
Yeah, well, Mokarita's still there, isn't it? Isn't it?
They'll look at getting that removed.
Yeah, and also I see there's a few, or 3 or 4, that haven't got their 24, 25 fees in.
So
they're zeros.
So some through you, if some of them are going from a fixed amount to an hourly rate with the new system they're putting in to hire them. So they might have no fees up in the full one, but if you look down, there might be an hourly rate on them. But I'll catch up with you and see if I've missed any in that respect. But yes, it does look like there is no fees, but further down there is. And some are choosing to give 100% refund, but that's noted as well in some of them, just to get some more usage through those halls.
Thank you. Any other questions? There being none, I'll take us to our recommendations on page 184, that we receive the report and we adopt the fees and charges as detailed in attachment A to apply from the 1st of July 2024, and we're resolving under sections 57 and 58 of the Local Government Rating Act 2002 to apply a penalty of 10% in the amount of rates, including metered water targeted rates that are unpaid from previous years and remain unpaid at the 1st of July 24, with the penalty being added on the 1st of July 24. Do we have someone in a position to move? Councillor Keast, seconded. Councillor Fraser. I'll put the motion. All those in favour, please say aye. Anyone against? Great. Thanks, Shelley. Our next item is the enforcement policy on page 251 of your agenda, and I'll welcome Adrian up to the table.
Tēnā koutou e te whānau. Good morning, everybody. I present to you today with some relish the draft enforcement policy for Southland District Council. Can I take it as read, Mr. Chair? Thank you. The idea of this policy is to display transparently to both the public and also staff on how we intend to enforce all of the legislation which we have a mandate to do within our district. And you'll see in the report that there's an awful lot of stuff which we as a territorial authority have to enforce. And that can be obvious stuff like dog control and resource management, but there's also stuff like bylaws which we create as local laws for ourselves. Now, not all of these would hold penalties. For example, some of the bylaws are directive instructions. Potentially they could have penalties, but it's extremely unlikely that you're going to get fined under the Ashton Flats bylaw. But other ones we use regularly at different levels to achieve enforcement and compliance. This policy is completely consistent with New Zealand law. It fits in with every other enforcement agency who have a policy. and it reflects the best practice in New Zealand as laid out by the Solicitor General, the Adjutant General, and also accepted practice through various bodies from central government. The key parts about it is it tells people what we do, and it tells them why we do it, and it also gives me the ability to educate both the public and the staff in a consistent way as to why we enforce and how we enforce effectively. You'll see in the actual policy that we have a graduated response. So we try to start by encouraging people to comply, by educating them, engaging with them, educating them. We try to enable people to do what they want to do where they can, so long as they're not breaking the rules and upsetting other people. And if they don't manage it in that way, we will then go to enforcement. But the other point I emphasise is some people need to be enforced against right away. And I'll give you an example using dog control is probably the easiest one. If somebody walks their dog from the house to the car and they go over 10 metres of road reserve, which is a dog on lead area, but a dog causing no trouble, jumps in the car, we receive a complaint, we talk to them, say, hey, just so you're aware, you need to stick your dog on a lead. Whereas if the same person has a dog which is classified as dangerous, they open the gate, this dog runs out up and down the road, growling at people, threatening people with stock, then we would take a different response to that. So it gives us the flexibility to do that. What is evident in the policy is that we must be fair, we must be reasonable, and we must be transparent. And we will be with this policy. And it gives me the opportunity to gather information and share with not only my own staff, but also the whole of this region. I've actually got a training day in August where I've invited all of our adjoining councils to come along with their compliance teams, where we can learn off each other, we can discuss parts of the policy and go through uniform approaches to stuff. So we're trying to get cleverer and better at this. It also lets us look at what we've done and how effective it's been, and therefore make adjustments if we need to improve our enforcement role. So I'm happy to answer any questions, but in a nutshell, I think I've covered the things that we need to cover in the policy.
Thanks, Adrian. It's quite pleasing to hear that you're working with the neighbouring councils as well and getting the uniformity. That's always good. We're not competing with our neighbours, and sharing that knowledge is always good. Are there any questions from the floor? Councillor Wilson? Thanks,
Adrian. Will this policy, there's been a couple of conversations this triennium around, you mentioned like the dog attack example. If we use the legislation of like the Litter Act, or the bylaw of freedom camping, will having this policy make it easier for the team to respond to community board calls for things like freedom camping ambassadors and litter wardens if they choose to do so?
So through you, Mr. Chair, one thing that's actually started already and will be complete before summer is a review of our regulatory services at the moment and what we're doing and what we're able to do and what we're not able to do. I know a frustration in some areas is that we don't have freedom camping people out on all sites when we need them there all the time. We have a limited capacity. What it will give us is the ability to cut our cloth to fit. So where we have problems and we have constant problems, we'll look at what we can do to address those. It may be putting local litter wardens in. However, if we were to go to that step, it needs to be a very, very controlled process. So if people were to be warranted as litter wardens, we need to make sure that they have the skills and attributes to be litter wardens. With freedom camping is more difficult because freedom camping in this district, we embrace it slightly, and we have some fantastic freedom camping facilities for people, which then annoys the people who live there because they think we're spending all the rates money on the freedom campers, and freedom campers is a very emotive subject, I know. However, if we do not embrace it slightly, then we're freedom campers everywhere. So what is at the front of my mind, and where I've been effective as a regulator before, is to give members of the public the opportunity to report offences. And we've even just produced a new form, which once we've been through a review of it, we'll probably be sending out to the community boards for people to record information where they see an offence, and they can give us the information we need to follow it up. This doesn't mean we'll immediately start throwing fines about. We'll look at what actually happened. We'll communicate with the people who've been accused of it if we can identify them, and we'll take action there. So there's a lot of different tools in the bag. It's not just about fining people, but that is an option. One of the problems with freedom camping, since the changes in the law last year, have these ginormous fines, which in theory you can impose on people. In my experience, trying to get $200 out of a lot of people with Freedom Camp is pretty difficult. So getting $1,200 out of them is going to be even more difficult. So we've got to try and find some other way of dealing with the issue. And ultimately, we're aiming to get in compliance, having people are recidivists. So there's a lot of options. It will enable us to be clearer in our approach. It will enable us to look at how we do things by looking at the metrics from what we're getting back. So it will improve our service, but it's all transparent, and that's what's really important. Does that make sense? Have I answered your question?
Yeah. The one nuance, I guess, of like the Litter Act example is in the Northern Community Board area, there's been a lot of ongoing issues with fly tipping and the dumping of animal carcasses, but because it's fallen on not council land, it's often referred to ES, so it's encouraging to know that maybe this kind of compliance will be across both entities if there's a more collaborative approach there.
Yeah, well, through you, Mr. Chair, I mean, I am collaborating with ES a lot more than we have done in the past. In fact, I had a meeting with them yesterday. With fly tipping, it's a personal bugbear of mine. In my previous council, I used remote activated cameras on public land, and we issued $2,400 fines within 2 months, and suddenly fly tipping practically ceased to exist. Where we had forestry land, which was getting a lot of fly tipping, including dangerous stuff like asbestos dumped on it, they asked us if we could assist them. We told them, yeah, stick cameras in this place, give us the evidence and we'll follow it. And we had some fairly good results out of that as well. So there are ways to skin a cat. The reality is we cannot stick cameras on private land unless the private landowner asks us to do it. But with fly tipping in particular, cameras are really useful because they have to bring a vehicle. And so you can find the vehicle and you can clock the individuals, and normally the two link together. And if they don't say, well, we're going to assume it's you unless you tell us who was driving it. And that tends to focus their minds on being compliant. So there are methods. Where we cross the border with the ES on that, I'm not entirely sure at the moment, but I'll have a chat with them and we'll look at how we can work together and get that done.
Maybe it's somehow connected to this, but just interested in your thoughts and comments. I mean, obviously enforcement action sometimes will elicit a response that might come to us so where's the point of heads up for elected members around just knowing?
Sure. So through you, Mr. Chair, again, I think this policy gives you a really good idea of what we are going to do as a council if you obviously adopt the policy. You have every right to listen to any member of the public telling you anything about what we do, and then pass it on to me and my team, and we will come back to you and let you know what we're doing. And this is happening already with a number of councillors who come to me with it. The actual involvement of councillors in the process is fraught in that you're not supposed to be involved at all. And the only part of legislation which allows councillors to be involved in an enforcement process is a Dog Control Act, where you can form a hearing and listen to it. Sale of Alcohol Act does the same provision, but you don't have to be a councillor to be on the DLC. So other than that, Adjutant General's guideline says let the decider decide. So you, through CEO, warrant myself and my officers to do a job. If you feel we're erring and making any errors in any way, you're more than welcome to raise that point with the CEO or myself, but you shouldn't involve yourself in the enforcement process. It's a protection for you and it's a protection for the council as well.
The question is more is there a point where it would trigger just a heads up? We're going to be taking action. It's likely to hit the media. There's likely to be other consequences. So I wouldn't want to be involved in the process.
No, absolutely. And if there's a storm coming your way, we would do you the courtesy and just be aware that this will happen. Yeah. In some cases, we don't do that because we need to keep it completely covert. That we're actually going to take action against someone, and we don't tell anybody other than within our team or other agencies. And then we take the action and then we let people know after. And we've had a recent incident of that in Winton where somebody was particularly obstructive. We went in with fire and emergency and police support and we did an inspection there. Had we released the information to other people, it could have got to other people and then it would have been a difficult process for us. So, yeah.
Okay, but Councillor O'Brien and then Councillor Duffy.
Through you, Your Worship. Thanks, Adrian, for the report. My question revolves around building compliance, change of legislation, how we as a council resource to be able to kind of deal with those situations. You may be aware that Minister Chris Bishop has announced this week that some new regulations may be coming out for public consultation over the next few weeks around the size of buildings and granny flats, that sort of thing. As a region and as a district, we struggle a little bit with regards to finding sufficient housing stock in particular areas. Elderly, for an example, we have old housing stock, 3-bedroom houses, so on. Do you see this as an opportunity for Southland in order to be able to capitalise on some of this new legislation? And do we have the resource to be able to deal with it?
So for you, Mr. Chair, there's a lot of questions in there, but first off, I think any legislation that makes building of self-housing easier is good legislation. I haven't seen all the detail on the granny flats legislation. I would refer to it. I have read the overview, and it's a great overview, but we don't know until the rubber exactly that legislation will say. What I can guarantee to you is that we'll comply with the law, which is the Building Act and the Building Code. And if it tells us that we can do it, we don't have local rules on building. Everything we do on building is through the government. Okay, so we're not going to say, oh yeah, but in our district we don't let granny flats be built. Quite the opposite. We want to encourage people to build good houses for people. So hopefully that legislation will come out in a form which enables us to get more housing through. I'm aware that 70% of our housing stock 50% of our housing stock is over 70 years old. And we've got too many 3-bedrooms, not on a 4, not on a, I'm aware of all this. So anything that enables us to meet our needs is good. But obviously it's got to be safe. And that's what the building code gives us, and that's what we'll enforce. On the resourcing side, we're lean, but we've got enough at the moment. A lot depends on how much activity there is in the building world. Given the current interest rates, we've got quite reduced house building compared to last year. We're about 13% down. But all it takes is interest rates to drop and a few big developments come in, suddenly we're 30% up. So we try to retain staff at a level which will meet our needs. And if it goes way above that, then we'll look at employing contractors on a short-term basis and assessing as we go along. So I have adequate resources. I don't have ample resources, but at the moment we'll work with what we've got and we'll get the best result for Southland.
Thank you.
Councillor Duffy?
Yeah, thank you. Adrian, I've had police tell me that it's not their function or role or ability to deal with council bylaw breaches, but then I've had council people tell me that that's not true, so I'm just wondering what the real story is.
Well, so for you again, Mr. Chair, the police have authority to enforce all council bylaws. However, they obviously have their priorities to deal with what they need to do under Crimes Act or whatever else, Land Transport Act or anything else. We cannot compel them to go out and enforce our bylaws. They would expect us to do that as a first call. What I would say, if there's a significant issue, and I suppose one example, which isn't a bylaw, but one example might be noise control late at night. So if you've got a police officer present in one of our more remote townships and there is a noise problem, that police officer's on duty. He has exactly the same powers as any RMA enforcement officer within council. I've only had good service from the police since I've been here, so I'm not going to bag them. I don't know any instance of where they've turned us down. In fact, they've been very supportive of us. They do have the powers. It's whether they have the time and the ability to enforce them. They might have more pressing stuff to deal with, and obviously that's not my call. So they do have the powers, they just might not have the opportunity.
Yeah, I think in terms of that noise, sometimes the expectation too, people don't realise who is actually responsible, whether it is, I think a lot of people assume it's the police when it's actually council as well.
Well, it is the council, but for you again, Mr. Chair, is if we are going to seize, we need to have a policeman present, and that causes us difficulty sometimes, because police don't have an officer available, at 2 o'clock in the morning. Equally, we're just in the process of forming a contract with an after-hours service which dictates more how we're going to do that work. We do have an after-hours service, but it's not contracted at the moment. It's a little bit loose. So we are trying to improve in these areas.
That's part of our challenge as well with our remoteness and getting a fast response to some things when we've got such a geographic area as well. Any other questions? Hearing none, I'll take us to our recommendations on page 251 that receives the report. and that we approve the adoption of the Southland District Council Enforcement Policy 2024. So I'm in a position to move that. Councillor O'Brien, seconded by Councillor Duffy. If there's no further discussion, I'll put the motion. All those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Anyone against? That's carried. Thank you for that.
Thank you.
Much appreciated. Okay, moving right along to 7.10, the Southland Township Futures Scoping Report, Program to Identify Growth, Resilience and Infrastructure. I'll welcome Caroline Ingalls and Michael is coming in on Teams. G'day, Michael.
Hello.
I'll hand over to the team. Thank you.
Thank you, Worship. Colin's done an amazing amount of work on this, so I will pass her on. But just as an overview, and I know you're all across this, is the fact that this report is exciting. It's about future of our townships and planning for that, and for the reasons mentioned, in particular resilience, sustainability, and of course economic development in those areas. So Karen's done some work on identifying how we can progress this, and I'll pass on to her to take you through some of the detail. Thank you, Worship.
Thanks. Thanks for Booty. So I thought it might be useful just to kind of summarise the process and then some of the key points that have come out of the report. So why do we need this piece of work done? So townships have reached the limit of current zoned land across a number of the townships that I've investigated. Infrastructure's reached capacity, or significant decisions need to be made about future provision of infrastructure. The output of the township plan work will provide input into the 2027-2037 long-term plan. That seems like a long way away, but and believe me, in planning terms, it's tomorrow. Review of the community board plans and support of the Southland District Plan Review, which is currently scheduled to commence in 2028. It also enables the council to consider other tools which may be needed to support township growth or development, and provides time for those to be implemented. So what are these plans that the report proposes? So these plans are envisaged to be place-based, collaborative, strategic and aspirational. The resulting plans should provide a clear direction for housing and other land use and set out the necessary infrastructure to support that land use. They also create future opportunities for townships, and we might not see those opportunities now because we haven't had the conversations and done the work. And the opportunities may not all sit with Southland District. They may in fact sit with individuals or companies currently within those townships, or indeed elsewhere. So good township planning processes will also have strong community participation and engagement processes that underpin them. So how was this work developed, and how is the spatial planning work proposed to be funded? So the report was developed through a desktop exercise using existing information augmented by interviews with subject matter experts internally to the council, and then with a handful of external subject matter experts, and discussions with community board chairs. The funding is that would support the community township plans is funded from Better Off funding and integrates the local water done well planning. So some common issues that have arisen across the townships. So growth is occurring across the district, although at differing rates in each township. Water infrastructure is an issue that arises across most townships. Housing is an issue in many locations, housing to support growth, or in fact picking up on the conversation about the type of housing that came up in a number of townships as well. Economic diversification, there's a need to kind of look to the future as opposed to be looking looking at the past and the economic diversification or the economic activity that's built a number of the towns in Southland. Visitor impacts, and you'll be well aware of the Hump Ridge track and the likely visitor impacts that the opening of that in October, or the upgrading of that in October, will bring. Town centre rejuvenation. Relationships within each community are vital, and this work would be an opportunity to cement those further. An issue that was raised time and again was how will communities fund development in the future? So the top six issues that, and I've just chosen six, that came up across the townships. So 13 townships have water infrastructure concerns. 13 townships where housing choice is an issue. 12 where growth is an issue. 13 where workforce has been identified. 8 where primary industry impacts are an issue, and by that I mean changes to the rural sector, changes to land use, climate change that is then driving primary industry changes, and aquaculture, to name just a few. And then 8 townships where economic infrastructure is an issue, and by economic infrastructure that means ports, wharves, and this is not an exhaustive list. Ports, wharves, boat ramps, buildings that support modern commercial activity in towns, a mix of services that support the economic activity of the town and the surrounding rural area, and marketing and promotion of townships. So the report also presents some sequencing options, and the notion is that over the next 2 years, all of the townships receive the township planning treatment to enable that input into the next LTP and community board plan review. 4 options are set out in the report, and there is, I guess, a staff preference for option 4, which commences with Oban, but really further investigation is needed to confirm the final sequence. And I think it's useful to note that as the work progresses, the sequence that is finally developed may be very different from any of the 4 that are before you now. And then there's a series of next steps set out, which excuse me, is focused on an initiation phase, which is actually a mix of governance and management options. And I think that unless Vibhuti has anything else, that's probably a nice summary of the report.
Thanks, Carolyn. Was there anything you wanted to add, Michael, at all from your point of view?
Thanks very much, Your Worship. I think this, as we said, this is probably the most exciting thing. I've been involved in local government for a very long time. And although there's, as Carolyn's outlined, all the things that we're going to do with it, I think what we need to be really clear about is how important the process of doing this is in terms of working closely with and engaging with our communities, so that the plans that are developed feel like they are owned by those communities rather than something that we've dreamed up in a planning room, in a back room, in the head office. So I think it's that whole engaging with communities and developing communities, which to me is the process issue, and then there's all the practicalities that fall out of the end of it. The two things to me need to go hand in hand. I've seen too many plans where those two things haven't gone hand in hand, and you end up with beautiful plans that do nothing. And I think this approach is quite a different way of doing that, and it takes care and expertise to do that. So yes, I commend the work that Carolyn's done. I think it's an excellent piece of work and sets the stage for a really exciting couple of years for SDC and the communities that we serve.
Thanks, Michael. And I'll just take us back to a statement that Councillor Wilson made a couple of council meetings ago when we were going through the long-term plan, and he said, this is just a budget and we actually need to have a plan for the plan, and this process is exactly that. It's actually getting up in that helicopter and getting on the front foot and proactively determining the future of Southland. And Southland isn't just one place, it's multiple places defined by community board areas, but this may even cross boundaries in community board areas as well. It's one thing that Carolyn's identified in talking with the boards and getting those common sort of issues across different areas. And, yeah, it might not be defined by those boundaries, but it'll be outcome focused, and the outcome for our communities will be really good here, I think, going forward. So it's been an iterative process with the community board chairs. We've talked to them through the board chair meetings, and there's quite a lot of excitement in the room with them as well. So I'll open up the floor for questions. Councillor Duffy.
I notice on number 10 and bullet point 4, it says many townships' existing industries are no longer viable. I'm just wondering, I'm thinking of coal out at Ojai, but I'm just wondering what other industries we've got that are in that situation.
That was the main driver for that comment. Of course, that may change with fast track legislation, because who knows where that's going to go. But yeah, the mining industry was the main driver for that. But there may be others that, with technology and I guess land use change in the rural sector, may also drive that. And these are 30-year plans, so that we would expect that change to occur in that time frame.
Just one other point, sorry.
There's another example for that is Mosman, where you had like a primary industry. There was Silverfern Farm, and factory, and that's great. And that was a big employer in the town. So yeah, I'll let you carry on. Sorry.
Just on number 11 on page 272, you mentioned the water supplies in those towns, including Edendale. We need to add Wyndham. It's the same water supply.
Yep. Thank you.
Thank you, Your Worship. If I may ask, what does success look like for this project?
I think that success is probably several things. One, and Michael's alluded to that, I think one is the engagement process that will that a community that the council will engage with the community, and I think the energy that can create in the community is really crucial. But energy directed at particular actions that everyone agrees on, then I think the plans also are a measure of what success looks like, because they can then drive your decisions around where you're going to make investment, your decisions about who your stakeholders or your key relationships are to achieve the best outcomes for the community.
Right. If I may take a few minutes, Your Worship, and just put my thoughts out loud about this one. This is going to cost us, we are going to use the $1 million that we've got from the Better Off funding for spatial planning. And yet I took a few screenshots. It says that we are not going to be looking at the spatial planning that Environment Southland is doing. We'll be going independently into this one. So that's one thing. I wonder how much duplication is there. The other thing is that we have other legislative processes that have been put into action by this new government, which we are not waiting for. Environment Southland has recently consulted on a regional climate change strategy. There are no outcomes for that one. The initial inquiry into the national framework for coastal adaptation ended midnight of 16th, the Sunday just gone. There's going to be ramifications from that one on. Again, we are undertaking this, and we know very clearly, because these spatial planning requirements have been done away from, this is not a statutory requirement. And we are trying to guess via a desktop exercise for the next 30 years. I just think there's too much duplication, too much work of all of this that has already gone on, be it SWORDS, the previous Southland Regional Long-Term Strategy, be it beyond 2025, be it the fact that ES is already doing something similar. I think at this stage of the economy and the fact, with rate rises and where things are, we should be focusing on things, spending our money on things which are tangible, things that we can touch, rather than plans here. Because at this point, the word aspirational worries me. It is aspiring towards something. What we need is something tangible here, something that gives something to our ratepayers right off the bat. And if this is not a statutory requirement, why should we be even going there? I mean, SWORDS decided that we need to have a goal of 10,000 new people in Southland. COVID came along. Something or the other will keep coming. We cannot have a wishing ball, a crystal ball into the next 30 years and know that what we are doing right now is going to pan out as planned. I think we need to go back to our core basics. Now we do have an opportunity to redirect 3 Waters Better funding into projects that we think that deserve the money, and we should be using that opportunity to redirect this 1 million into somewhere else and wait until we get a more suitable direction from these 2 climate change pieces and the coastal adaptation work to see. I mean, I'll give you an example. When the mayor repeatedly, we extended the state of emergency around Blue Cliffs, and the word that was coming was tell the residents to look after managed retreat. We might have some plans for Tuatapri or that end of the coast, and the coastal adaptation planning framework, because it's going to be now legislated, it might completely put paid to whatever we have decided. I don't think this is a sensible use of $1 million, to be very honest. Just my thoughts here.
Thanks, Jaspreet. I'll respectfully disagree with some of what you're saying, but just put a bit of my insights into it as well. In terms of the ES spatial planning, so this time last year, whenever it was, when the RMA was being reformed, there was going to be a requirement for that regional spatial planning piece, which is now no longer there. I think part of what we do too often is wait for Wellington to dictate what we do, and I see this piece of work as going, irrespective of what's happening, Southland grabbing hold of the reins and actually saying we're going to develop Southland how we want to develop Southland for Southland, not waiting to see that, because Wellington's a pendulum and it just keeps swinging in either direction. And for me, this is, let's not wait for Wellington to tell us what to do. Let's actually grab the bull by the horns in Southland and define our own kind of destiny. And ES, this piece of work, they're talking about doing, it's a different approach. So we're not going to be double handling it. It'll feed into what they do, but they're looking at doing it quite a lot down the track as well, sort of 2028, 2029. And we're going to need some of their data that they've got on the spatial planning side of things for the flood data and all that kind of piece. So we won't be working in a silo outside of that. We'll be working in conjunction with ES and working together to get that plan and feeding into the regional side of what they'll be doing. And when you talk about the kind of core basics, to me this is actually the core basics. It's actually getting that I mean, it sounds, the word aspirational, I know it's a buzzword at the moment, but it's actually, it's a saying I've used a few times, it's failing to plan is planning to fail. And I was talking to a mayor on Friday who's done a spatial plan for his area, and he's getting a whole lot of government funding at the moment, quite significant for that area, because they've actually got a holistic plan and they can actually say, yep, we need this, and this is why we need this. It's got that data. Beyond 25 feeds into this. It's not a standalone process. It's SWORDS was done, Beyond 25 has been done, and that provides some direction, but it actually feeds in, and this is us actually defining Southland going forwards from that basics, the basics of housing, where we put the housing, how we link that housing to the infrastructure, where we put that infrastructure, how we can grow these towns. Going back to the 90s, Southland was very different, and I referenced Mosman before. They had a thriving venison plant in there, which was a big employer in the town. A lot of the towns, Lumsden had 2 timber mills going. All of that kind of stuff's changed, and we've continually reacted to stuff coming from Wellington, but we haven't really sat down and grabbed what do we want Southland to look like. And we do our long-term plans every 3 years, and to Councillor Wilson's point, they become a kind of reactionary piece to setting budgets for the work that we have to do to keep the cogs turning, and then we do a district plan every 10 years, and that's going to be coming up again soon. And doing the district plan for the sake of the district plan worries me in the same way that this long-term plan's been an incredibly painful process. So when Carolyn was saying this is going to feed into the next long-term plan, it goes back to my statement right at the start when I said to Anne, how do we do a different long-term plan at the start of this one? Come and talk to me 6 months ago. So this is defining how to shape this process to be more linked in and tied into our communities.
I may respond to that. I hear what you're saying there, Rob. But I also heard what the team was saying. And what is being said is, what industries, what's going to shut down, what's going to open. All of that is not our place as a council, I believe, to be going into. Businesses, free markets, they will do what they have to. We should not be going there. Ultimately, if this is about where, what do they call it now? Local water is done well and where that's to be placed, we have done some impact of that, that where we need be spending more capital works in the LTP. So there is some amount of planning on the water resources that the communities we need into the future there already. And beyond that, yes, we do need to develop plans, but that bigger generic purpose of time and again in this plans, it's been said people want affordable lifestyles. It is not our job to dictate or to even decide that this sort of business is going to be closing and this is going to be coming in at a time when we cannot afford the very basics. If you go and ask any ratepayer today, I'd say the vast majority would be like, stick to your knitting. Stick to your knitting. Things happen organically. We cannot be having a 30-year lens deciding, this is what's going to happen in the future. Our job is just basic infrastructure, rates, roading, rubbish, and that's it.
But what I'd say to that is,
if you're trying to be everything to everyone,
it's not trying to be everything to everyone. It's about setting up a platform, and I'll use Northern Southland as an example. So one of the easiest ways to decrease the pressure on the ratepayers is to add more ratepayers. And we've got housing. I had a builder come and see me, and he said, I've got 8 people wanting to build houses. Can you hurry up and unlock some land for me so that we can do it? So that's another 8 ratepayers in a very small town that, from a percentage point of view, 8 ratepayers in Auckland is nothing, but 8 ratepayers in Balfour is quite significant, and that actually reduces the load and increases the people in the town. It creates more volunteers, it creates more kids for the schools. It's unlocking that growth. I know Matt will attest that there's definitely demand for the area in Northern Southland, and council has a role to actually provide that platform for that to go. I'm not saying we're going to dictate which businesses go there.
That is just routine business, isn't it? When we look at the district plan and we do that, that is routine business to see, right? But a standalone piece of work here. The Three Waters funding in some of the previous projects, we've been given a bit of money and the rest our ratepayers have put in. We've had some big projects now, one of which is going to be inaugurated soon. And close to, 450,000 of ratepayer money went into it. I see this 1 million coming in. And how much of that is going to go into basic infrastructure or the district plan? We update it. But that has always been a part of routine council work. Why these standalone things that are now we are putting these aspirational projects in? We do not have a crystal ball here, I think.
We don't have a crystal ball, but I think we've got an opportunity to provide a good sound platform to get Southland where it needs to go. But I'll open up to Councillor Fraser and Councillor Duffy.
I just support your kind of comments about the 8 new rate houses developed in Balfour. The same voice would be heard in Winton. For the last 7 years I've been on council, this has been something that has been asked for. So I'm certainly very supportive because nobody knows where to go. Where we're going. We're at the edge. Where can we build next? And this can inform our district plan, which then allows some land to be opened up. That's critical for my town. Likewise, I'm sure it is for others. I don't know if it's even about. It's taken account business and stuff, but this to me is all about unlocking land to allow the community to develop. I know we have in Winton. There's people wanted it in the report. People wanted to build a rest home, and they're going, we can't build it. There's nowhere to build it. That we can build it in the current plan. This is critical. That's my take.
Councillor Duffy.
Oh, yeah, well, I agree with that. I think that not doing this sort of work will be far more costly later. It's very, very expensive to do plan changes and plan reviews. And so, like with our last plan, we put it in place and suddenly it was out of date probably halfway through the term. And that's what's costly. I'm just thinking too about the spatial aspect of it. Very few of our towns have actually got industrial areas. And if you look at Edendale, for an example, which through a had hot growth, we've got a primary school which was beside the state highway and next to a railway line, and with the largest now dairy factory in the world over the road, which wouldn't have happened perhaps if back in the day there was some spatial planning. And I think that's the sort of, and I don't think anyone's asking us to pick winners or losers industrial wise, but it's just provision for, so we haven't got these blockages that are really expensive down the line.
And Te Anau is quite a good example if you look at it as a quite a big growth town at the moment, and you look sort of, you know, a lot of people reflecting on Queenstown quite negatively in that kind of unmanaged growth, and it was kind of haphazard and everything kind of happened in Te Anau it's growing quite quickly, and they're having to sort of add pieces on and clip on at the end. So we're in a position now where we've got the growth coming, and we've actually got the ability to control how that kind of goes.
I'm probably wrong, but our last plan review cost us $5 million. But I can't remember, but I mean it's a lot of money.
Potentially even more than that.
It might have been, yeah.
I having through you, Your Worship, being involved in a district plan review, I'd be surprised if you came anywhere under 5 million. It's probably north of that, to be sure. And I just very briefly, a couple of things, probably to you know, just the overarching picture. I think you've all touched on it, but through Your Worship, just a couple of things. I've only been here a week, however, there is all your policies, your decisions, your spending should ideally link off a strategic framework, and I think there is a gap there. It's that strategic framework that's being talked about here, which you're all talking about, and just the other point around that. The way this process runs, having seen it run in a few districts that have really grown well over time, and I'm going to pick Waipa as an example. But anyway, point being, the way this process is intended to run is that it is the community's input into their future. And Michael and Carolyn have both made that, and so has the Mayor, a very key point. It is their future. Where do they see it, what their aspirations are, and that is what will be the plan, which you can then hinge your funding decisions off or your policy decisions off. And I think that is critical. And there is very much a possibility that you might just be tacking things on if you don't do a futuristic look at things. And the nature of strategic thinking is that you will think of industries and you'll think of what's coming and going and you know, where aliens might land in the future, but that's just the nature of you know, how we plan. So I just wanted to lay that picture of all that.
Probably just important just to add in terms of the strategic direction. I'm quickly looking at ease of doing business, which does mean connecting through for developers and other people. They know what is expected and what's on the horizon when that work community is supportive of that development in that location with robust infrastructure. Obviously, if the development happens in the right location, then it makes it easier for the infrastructure to be robust, because we should have been talking about climate change and inundation and all of those other things that would otherwise make our infrastructure harder to manage. So, you know, is it a flooding area? Is there good stormwater management? How do we go about putting, you know, what's the right connection for wastewater? All of those things are thought about in this process of doing spatial planning or the township planning, as well as connected and resilient communities. The opportunity to actually forge their own future is connected to that one. So just from a strategic, I know Booty hasn't been here very long, but just in terms of the framework that we've been working on with the new LTP, I do think that this does, you know, allow for that of the dots. So just put that one on the table quickly.
Thanks. Rodney?
Yeah, this, I don't know if I use Michael's words of exciting, but it's definitely strategic, and I'm happy to read this report, and feel like a lot of conversations for the last 18 months have also really fed into it. I think coming to the stage of the LTP, there were so many budgeting assumptions based on capital projects forecasted based on kind of growth metrics, some of which dated back to the 2013 census, and it's hard to keep on top of what these small towns look like and what their needs are when you're stuck in this prescribed LTP process. So the need for having a community engaged plan for their township, I think, is incredibly important, and I can speak from the experience in Lumsden where there is experienced growth. The Beyond 25 strategy identifies growth, but then actually executing that growth is hard when, despite having subdivision lines planned out in 1907, the current district plan zoning and the current infrastructure plan or lack of a plan makes actually executing that growth really hard. So to go back and go, right, what's the plan for this town? Have it informed by important things like the hydrology, information from ES. We heard Steve Canny this morning talk about what they've looked at just with the airport and just the exercise of doing a geotech assessment and a hydrological assessment for what the needs of that airport. So that same kind of data for a small town. As far as where it sits in with like the regional planning, it needs to work hand in hand, because regionally we need to understand, particularly with the rivers travelling through the region, the floodplain management into the future, all of that on a regional lens needs to be planned for, and all of the transport connections and critical infrastructure in between. But when you then shrink down to just a township, how does that link into that regional spatial plan? Otherwise you get caught up just doing a district plan or a regional plan, but you need to define plans for these townships. So I'd encourage just a couple of feedbacks, ensuring that some of this is considered cross-boundary as well. There's examples, like there's a lot of talking of Garston, Athol, Lumsden kind of being lumped together, but the natural assumption too would be that Kingston, just up the road, is going through significant growth. So let's not get too caught up in, if we're talking 30-year plans, what these boundaries are. Riversdale's just up the road from Mandeville, which is also experiencing growth, and there's other examples. And then in the point 6, the tools to implement these plans, I'd really encourage also utilising LIDAR with it goes without saying, and it would be used, but I think really specifying that as a planning tool is, even at a desktop level, is way more than what we had 3 years ago. So we've paid ratepayer and taxpayer and regional ratepayer money to have that technology. Let's make sure it's used, but then also utilise those old maps from the early 1900s, because some of the stuff's been, like it's not that hard to, some of this planning work's been done as far as area and subdivision lines. It's now just figuring out whether the hydrological or the geotechnical areas are in the right place for growth, and a lot of that does then come back to Environment Southland and their floodplain management, because a lot of these small towns do sit within floodplains. So it's not siloed. It runs aligned with the regional spatial plan. It kind of also runs in line with Environment Southland's floodplain management, and I just hope that hydrological information, if it's not readily available, can actually just get figured out, because if I use Lumsden as the example, it seems to be like the major data gap to get to get on with writing a plan. That's the first step, is understanding that hydrological, what are the risks from the river floodplain management, but also the smaller areas within the town's catchment. Once you know that, then you can write a plan.
Thanks. Good time.
Thank you, Your Worship. Yeah, just a couple of comments and a question. This notion that adding ratepayers makes the water infrastructure cheaper, I think is not actually correct. And I think Tauranga is perhaps a case in point, the fastest growth in the country, but they can't afford the infrastructure. So my comment is that we really do need to look at doing the water infrastructure differently in a way that does make financial sense for the community. And we look at this 10-year plan we've done, we've come up with water challenges, but it doesn't make financial sense. It's going to cripple the ratepayers. So that the way we're doing the water needs to change. As far as the plan goes and the funds that are there, I do have a lot of sympathy for this idea that we do a lot of plans, and it's been mentioned a couple of times, a lot of plans, and they end up on the back shelf at great expense. So this is going to be a sequence of do the towns in a sequence. I'm wondering how you can ensure that all of the towns that are to be done are going to get fair treatment, rather than perhaps, for example, going to Oban and spending half of the funding on hydrological studies or whatever is required to make these plans. Is there some way that we can be sure that the funds are going to be distributed across the towns and that we're going to get some plans for all of the towns that's going to make sense and be useful for
yeah, through your worship, how about we make a note of that, that we should ensure that that's how we'll do it. So we'll definitely do it that way. So we'll make a point of making sure when we're doing a detailed planning that we don't finish off the 1 million in the first 3 plans. Oh, and I think Carolyn has also mentioned the initial thinking is we'll have 9 plans. But it could well be that there are 3 or 10 actually. We just need to put more work into the detail of the planning, and we'll definitely budget the program accordingly. Point. It's a bit hard, other than to say conceptually, yes, we agree with the idea that that's how it should be, and we will ensure in the detailed planning that it isn't that we've run out of money and therefore we can't do the last 3 plans. I don't know that we can do anything else at this point, only because you were seeming slightly skeptical.
I am slightly skeptical. I'm concerned that the money disappears pretty quick.
Could I just add that the townships are different scales and they're facing different issues. So, and to kind of build on what Vibhuti has said is that your notion of having an equitable distribution across the townships is I guess is an aspiration, but because each township is a different scale and is experiencing different issues, it may be that a particular township may need a piece of work done that another may not. To actually work on the basis of having this amount of money and the $1 million and splitting it by 9 or 10 or whatever the number is, that may not actually serve the townships to achieve the outcome that's needed.
Well, perhaps rather than doing one town, and perhaps you could spread the funds across all of them, but less funds. And then if there's a town that requires more, once you've done all of the towns up to a certain level, then there might be some funding left to go into a bit more detail around some special cases.
The outcome, through you, Your Worship, the outcome you're looking for is that each community should have developed their plan and be comfortable with where they see their future. So as long as we ensure that that happens, Are you comfortable? Does it matter if it was 500,000 somewhere and 20,000 somewhere? As long as they're comfortable that they have that input and you've got a plan that you can work off and make your other decisions around, is that not the outcome you're looking for? Would that suffice, is my question, because that's what we are seeking to achieve through the process.
That sounds great.
Yeah, sure. All right, so
But as long as it happens, though, because.
If I can just add as well, which come up in the board chair discussion, is there's going to be some, I'm not going to use a phrase, I'll have to use the phrase low-hanging fruit, some items that can be actioned that come up during the process, and we're not going to go, well, let's wait till the end to action them. If there's something really clear and obvious that comes through, unlocking some land somewhere for argument's sake, we're not going to say, oh, we're going to wait till the end of the planning process to do it. So it's going to be quite an iterative process going through as well in terms of, and just emphasising that community ownership aspect of it, that it's driven, we've got a really unique and powerful resource in our community boards and driven through the local communities. Sorry, Tom.
Yeah, through you, Worship. Thanks, Carolyn. Welcome, Vibhuti. And Michael, thank you for the report. There's been quite a bit discussed here today, which I agree with, and quite a bit that I don't agree with. In terms of governance perspective, based on what Rob was saying earlier, I think we run the risk or danger of running the 100-metre track and getting 90 metres and then falling over and not getting across the finishing line if we don't have that linkage between ourselves and central government in terms of being motivated and driven and having the creative ability to be able to look at our region in the scope that we have and the resources that we have or we don't have. That is absolutely vital and important from a central government perspective in terms of where their motivation is for ongoing funding. That's the first point I'd make. The second thing I would say related to that relatively recently is can anyone comment on the government's dialogue around the recent infrastructure symposium? In terms of exactly what I'm talking about, like here we are, Southland as a region, we have a small ratepayer base, we have $265 million worth of water assets that we need to do something with, we have our roads, bridges, blah, blah, blah. We have an ageing population, we don't have sufficient housing infrastructure, all of the things that are linked to infrastructure and growth and business and health. Does anyone have any comments around the recent infrastructure symposium that was taken, was it last Friday?
Yeah, on Friday, yeah.
Would you like to speak to that?
Yeah, I can. In terms of this process, I think this is vital for the messaging that came out of that. And when Minister Bishop spoke on the Thursday night, he talked about that value add component. And when you say linking up with central government, totally agree. We need to link up with central government. But what I was saying is we don't sit and wait for them to direct.
I couldn't agree more, Your Worship.
And this is when they talk about housing, they will fall in love with a council that enables more housing. That's what the government wants, and it makes the government look good. And if we come to the government with a platform to say, we've identified in, I'll just pick a town, Fairlight, we've got a township that we're going to develop there that's going to add 3,000 houses, I'm talking very hypothetically here, into the mix. And here's how it's going to work, and we need this X part to be funded. And that partnership kind of approach is something the government would be very favourable for. So it's a different approach to doing things, but it all fundamentally comes back to having that plan in place. And I'm going to deviate a little bit, but I think about that Beyond 25 plan, that it's ragged, my copy of it, because it comes in my bag with me, it sits on my desk, it hasn't sat on the shelf, because it's actually a relevant plan that you can refer to, and I refer to it talking in Wellington as well. It's that kind of plan that we need, not the kind of plan that is this thick and goes and gathers dust. And it becomes like a kind of a buzzword with planning and aspirational and all those kinds of things, and you still want to use them, but I can really see this being different and being well used and being good to feed into the conversations that are coming in Wellington, irrespective of the colour of the government that's in there. And I think this is the important part for us to kind of, it's us taking our destiny into our own hands, fitting in with whatever's happening around the things. And it'd be nice to tell Wellington how to do things for once. Just Breed asked before, what does success look like? And to me, success looks like our next long-term plan. Everyone's smiling going through the process because we've actually got a well-informed process. Our district plan talks to itself, so when we go through the process to do it, we've got a sound district plan. When government come along with a pot of gold from Shane Jones's infrastructure fund, you can say, we need X amount here, X amount here, X amount here, and this is what it's going to deliver for Southland, and this is what it's going to deliver for New Zealand. And it's those kinds of conversations where you've actually got the data and the planning and everything to back it up, rather than going, oh, well, we might need something over here maybe, but and this is what we might do. Everything's kind of up in the air at the moment. So.
Well, and with respect to that comment that you've just made, regardless of the colour of the government, we've seen some systemic failures with regards to where funding has gone. And, you know, we do talk about community engagement and how important it is, but also I think our signalling has got to be very, very clear and important when it comes to where that government funding is coming from and where it is specifically being allocated from. Because unfortunately we have seen in relative history some instances where, you know, funding has probably not been prioritised correctly within our communities or within our regions and our areas. And I think we really need to pin down and put a spotlight on that. So something to think about. Yep.
Thanks, Councillor. So we've had some really good discussion, as this council always does, on this item. And we've got, I think I challenged someone in a couple of council meetings ago to come up with the longest recommendation. I think this one is...
Maybe a prize.
So we've got quite a... let me go through the book here. So A to C are standard ones. D, we approve establishing a program of work to implement the Southland Township Future Scoping Report. E, that we note that it will be funded from the Better Off funding. F, we're establishing specific program governance to support the decisions in the report. This may include the establishment of an advisory group selected from across the district. That we initiate discussions with Ngāi Tahu Ki Murahiku on the nature of their participation in the Township Futures program. We note there's a current preference for sequencing option 4 commencing with Oban, but further work will be needed to confirm this. The ultimate sequence followed may change as the program progresses. And we note that some townships and sequencing options are clustered. The ultimate configuration of township clusters may change as the program progresses. So I just guess emphasising it's in its high level early stages, so there's room for movement in there. And that we direct the Chief Executive to commence procurement for the Southland Township Futures program. Identify an internal program lead who has responsibility for the program initiation and development. We seek specialist community participation advice as part of procuring the program in order to keep the design effective. Collaboration, engagement and participation approaches. We establish appropriate program and project management to support alignment, collaboration, risk management and review. And we undertake a process review as each community township plan is completed and include the knowledge gained into the following plan process. And finally, that we note that each community township planning exercise should commence with community engagement to reconfirm existing or identify new outcomes or aspirations for each community. So all very valid in those lengthy recommendations. Councillor Byers.
Thanks, Your Worship. I'm wondering if we could get an update back from staff as this plan proceeds. Whichever one that gets started, and that would include the analysis of costs to date.
That's a good idea. Would a quarterly update to council be sufficient?
I think that would be fine to start with, Your Worship, and we can increase or decrease the time as we proceed.
So we'll put that in as an F for you, Councillor Byers. Or in... Oh, sorry, I'm looking at the wrong page, sorry.
Staff report quarterly to council.
Sorry, Councillor Byers.
Perhaps you could just replace F with that.
establishing.
Is there a need for F?
We need to still
Yeah, still need to, because it's establishing the, but we could add to F if you wanted to, and say with regular reporting back to council. Quarterly reporting.
Quarterly reporting to council on the progress of the program.
Councillor Wilson?
I've just got a, just an observation. I know the recommendations and resolutions are still saying that it's the timeframes and the order is likely to evolve, but I'm assuming year one is initiation is this July we're talking now. So is there a risk that year two, that October, November, that would be election time? So we're going to have a change of potential changes within council, within community board. So is there maybe the need to have a little wee hiatus in that year two for transition? Because if you happen to be the town that's going through this process in the October, November period where you're still just forming a new community board or a re-established community board, it could be a bit of a disadvantage to those towns. So I just want to make that observation that year two timeline could have that interruption with election. That should be noted.
I guess it's a very relevant point, Councillor, and I forgot to mention it before, but part of my ambition for this is that it becomes election cycle proof, because if you get that really good community, there should only really be minor adjustments. And obviously, I mean, it's only important for this part of the process, but going forward, because it's going to be an adaptive, iterative thing that the community knows all about it and owns it already. So the people from the community are coming in, then it should already be important. That's a good point. Is there any further discussion? We have a mover for the motion. Councillor Duffy to second it. I'll put the motion. All those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Anyone? Councillor Duffy.
Reserve judgment, hopefully for the first update. I might just be convinced, but for now, very honestly, I've been looking at the previous Excels that came through from Great South and others, that they did all these projections, housing projections, regional skill workshop, workforce shortages and so on. I just think at this point this is old winey bottle, but as I said, maybe in the first update might be corrected.
Thank you, Councillor. I'll declare that carried. Thank you very much, and thank you to the team. I know a lot of work's gone into that. Thank you, Michael. Thanks, Carolyn. Thanks, Peter. It's been a very good process. And now will be a very good time. I'd like to welcome Charlie and Bobby. We have Steve come and present this morning first thing. So the great work is from You're going to talk to us about the other great work that great South is doing. I'll hand over to you, Charlie.
Kia ora, and thank you very much, Mayor Rob. Appreciate the time that is given to me today to be in front of the council. Again, I always enjoy coming through, and hopefully we'll have a seamlessly easy presentation. I'm going to whip through this pretty quickly so that we could leave room for questions, which I welcome from the council. So again, thank you for having us, and this is really just a quick overview of the deliverables we've had against the statement of intent for the 23-24 financial year quarter three update. So there is some information in here, though, more relevant today as well. As you know, vision is to provide even better lives through sustainable regional development. And in the current year, we've had 4 priorities identified, and we were working against those. Regional development leadership, regional promotion, business support and diversification, and the decarbonisation support that we provide to businesses under the Net Zero Southland banner. So regional development leadership, we've progressed a few areas, 2 of which I've asked Bobby to come through and speak to you because I believe this will be of interest. These are items that, or projects that have started this year but will continue on over the next few years as what we've embarked on this year is just the very first initial foundational sort of steps. So I'll hand it over to Bobby to take us through the data stuff.
Awesome. Okay, so thank you for having us. Look, I'll just be really quick because you've heard me go on about this for quite a few months, and I'm really looking forward to coming back July, August when we have the whole thing completed. So the unified data system, which we talked about before, which was the repository of data sets, which we then put on a website and turned into dashboards, that will be completed about mid-July. So that is all going to plan, touch wood, and we've been delayed with one of the data sets because we've chosen to wait for the census results to come out so we can slip them in tidy, so the population dashboard won't be completed till maybe September. So just to refresh, we've got 4 dashboards. We've got environment, housing, we've got economic, and we've got a bit of tourism. How could I forget tourism? Okay, and that's just a little bit of a look of what it looks like. Remember, the beauty of this is that we're trying to make it easy for the general public, community groups, government funders to just go to one place and find information. So not everything will be there, but there will be links to where there's other databases. So think of it like a place that you can disperse to find lots of different information. That's an example of what the economy one will look like. So for this stage, we've just chosen 6 data sets or data sources because there are so many that you could have. So we've thought about how we measure success or how we measure progress in the economy. So we've included things like GDP, GDP per capita. We've got some really interesting stats on exports in there because obviously we are definitely a powerhouse for the country, contributing just under 12% of all pastoral exports come from our region. So things like that are going to be there, and there'll be commentary around, just so you can see the trends. And that one is the tourism one. So thank you to Te Hikoi and Curioscape because they've provided some of their data, their door counts. And what we'll have is a map there, that New Zealand map will be a Southland map, and you'll be able to get a really good glance of the numbers of visitors around the region. So of course we don't have a really good data set that gives us that one snapshot. So what we're just trying to do is to provide insights to give lots of different trends and information. Just before we go there, an interesting one is with the announcement yesterday around Granny Flats. That figure around Airbnb listings and occupancy rates with commercial and non-commercial accommodation will be very interesting to watch. I think the last one was housing. You might have gone the wrong way.
Have I gone the wrong way? Sorry about that.
My fault. Okay, so housing has been probably the one that we've spent the most time on. There's lots of interesting statistics which have come out, and it's quite interesting because people obviously think Southland, because we've got a low cost of houses, that we're pretty good for housing, but we have some of the most horrendous statistics in the country. So from the fact mortgage serviceability through to things like, I've got a couple of facts. So our rents have increased 70% since 2018 compared to 41% nationally. We've still only got 15 or 16% of our whole stock is long-term rental accommodation compared to 32% nationally. So the problem with housing is that there's lots of different parts of the continuum that if you touch one part, whether it be social housing or executive housing, it all interconnects. The other statistic, which we've just hot off the press this morning, is around new dwelling consents. And we actually have the lowest new dwelling consents per 1,000 residents in New Zealand. So that's quite significant because we also know people are getting consents and then they're actually not choosing to build yet. So you've not only got the low stat, but you've got not the next step of building happening. Okay, so it's not all doom and gloom, but again, the purpose of having this information is to inform business case, encourage developers. Remember, we've got about 47,000 houses all around the region, and there's only 446 which are government owned. So they are a very small part of the housing picture, but an important part when you think of that continuum.
Okay, and I think I've kind of covered all that. That's basically just saying, look, we're going to come up with this housing plan, which I think is the next slide. And hopefully I'm allowed to come back in the next month or two to have a good chat about this, because I think it's going to align with the spatial planning work which has been going on, because it's not just about not enough houses, it's about the right type of houses and where they're located, and then how you guys as a regulator or a provider or an enabler, what role you play, because there's very different roles. So look, I'll come back and talk about this action plan later, but this is about us getting geared to actually hit some of these key issues that I've talked about on the head. And we can only do this if we work together. Done.
Thank you, Bobby. So another piece of work that we did, and I know I've spoken about this before, so we do have the 7 sort of opportunity papers that were presented, were developed with the input of our shareholders and stakeholders, and was presented to Minister Mark Patterson when he came down in May, middle of May. What that has identified for us is a lot more engagement, a lot more conversations from the Minister's office, especially around Southland roading and Southland bridges, and how we could package, how they can support us to package up a deal, how we can access central government funding to complement the investments that are already being made by local government. So it was a very powerful meeting, although we didn't really realize at the time, because it was kind of like a sounding board, an associate minister of sorts, but the output from it has been really significant. With the opportunities, we've just identified this on a visual map and showcasing that our opportunities are across our region, and no one region really benefits greater than any other region. So all of the councils have worked. Council staff have put in information to this as well, and it is a very powerful document. So the confirmation or the information we got back from central government was that Southland knows what we want. You've done your homework, you've got a regional plan. From that regional plan, you've identified your priorities. From your priorities, you've then identified what's being invested in, what will bring greatest economic benefit, and so you're really ready to go. And that's above any other region in this country. So we are in a very strong position, and we're very proud that Southland is in that strong position. So we've got hopefully Minister Jones coming through shortly. I don't know when his office hasn't confirmed exactly the date, but they're looking at doing regional summits, and our understanding is that Southland has been in a really strong position to get him to come down. So that's really the stuff that we did around regional development leadership, and that's a lot of work that stemmed from the Beyond 2025 Southland long-term plan. Those action points that we've identified here will continue over the next few years, and as you know, most of the projects that we do are not short-term. They cover a number of years. And I'll quickly whip through the rest of the stuff. So regional promotion, we've had some really good campaigns that have had good engagement. Air New Zealand campaign in particular has given us a good exposure across the country. We've also had a number of FMILs, media FMILs that have come through to the region. Trends for mills that was held in May this year. So we've had a number of trade opportunities that have eventuated from that. We are also, I'm not sure if the council will know, but the Tourism Export Council is holding their conference in Southland in Invercargill in August this year. So there's further opportunities for us to showcase our region. This website traffic is in relation to southlandnz.com, and we're very pleased with the results that we've got on it. The staff have been really proactive around getting the word out, encouraging businesses to list their events, and it just, again, really consolidates the fact that when you have a central repository of information, it makes it so much simpler for people to know where to go. So the visitation numbers to our website has increased, and we're well on target to reach our totals. The page views, as well as the social media followings, as you can see, that has exceeded our goals for the year. I mentioned the trade events, trends, and of course, Tech New Zealand, which is, as I mentioned, in August this year in Invercargill. Just looking at the stats from the events in southlandnz.com area, the number of events listed has increased significantly, as have the visitors, and the total number of visitors from Southland residents has also increased exponentially. So really, really pleasing numbers, and it just, I think, consolidates the approach that we're taking to reach as many people as we possibly can with minimum sort of resources, but really effectively getting them engaged. Under destination management, there were several activities that were progressed. Cycle tourism, dark skies. We've also had the sustainable tourism webinar series running for businesses operating in the tourism space. Data and dashboards we already spoke about, and those dashboards will, so the beauty of what we're trying to do with Dish is that we will have real-time information available to public, to shareholders, to stakeholders to make informed decisions. And then we've also done some work around the coastal walk feasibility around the Catholics as well. Business support and diversification. In this area, we hold a contract for the Regional Business Partner Program, as you know. And this is just stats for Southland businesses. And looking at it as a percentage of the total that we've done for the year, roughly it coincides with sort of like the population dispersation of our region. So 55% around about that in Invercargill, 35% around Southland area, and close to maybe 10 or a little over 10 in the Gore district area. This wasn't done intentionally, but when we did the numbers and evaluated it, we've seen that, you know, it reflects sort of the businesses in those areas that service the population in those areas. Therefore, it seems like we've got good traction. We've had a few visits out to Tiano for the growth advisors over the years, and those are just some of the dates. So businesses are continuing to be engaged through the RBP and the Callahan program. This year, we've also started a Beyond Great Southland Business Update newsletter, which goes out bi-monthly. So the second one will be out soon. Under business support and diversification, we also have the Southland Youth Futures program, and we've spoken to the council before about that. So again, we continued. We were lucky to get funding for another year. So that funding comes to an end in December this year, which allowed us to continue work with the seniors at the schools for their work-ready passports. So Northern Southland College, Central Southland College were visited. And then we've also delivered 2 of the modules at Fiordland College earlier this year. Finally, the Mayor's Task Force for Jobs, which we went into a contract with Southland District Council earlier this year. The council, I'm assuming, and correct me if I'm wrong, you are aware of the MTFJ program. So this program, we're working with needs predominantly, those not in employment or education or training, and really pleasing to have been able to set up the job hubs in 5 of the areas within Southland District, within Riverton, Winton, Tiano, Nightcaps and Wyndham. We've got 38 people on our books, 18 of them are job ready, 20 of them are not. Working with the not work-ready people is a lot more sort of intensive and time-consuming than those that are. Sometimes it's just as simple as, getting them to get their driver's license, but in most cases, there's a lot of other underlying issues that need to be addressed before they're able to go into a place of work. Our work with the businesses under the Southland Youth Futures program has enabled us to keep a good database of employers, and we're really, really happy that we've got 48 employers that are willing to work with us to support those people with higher needs into their workplace. It's been a really good exercise, and what has amazed me the most, I think, is the fact that the council staff, of course, Mayor Rob, and our employers, how we've all pulled in together to find suitable opportunities, and the way that we strategize and try to find a suitable solution for these people has been really, really engaging, and it's been wonderful to see, actually. And we've even been able to approach Invercargill City Council for some of their parks jobs or library jobs and so on and so forth to place our clients into those. And they've been also very receptive. So just another indication that we are working a little more collaboratively than we probably have in the past. And a good project will always get good buy-in. Get a life. So under business support, in our SOI, we established that we would set up a toolkit for businesses to help with their recruitment process. And what we came up with is Get a Life, Get Southland concept. It has been well received. The only negativity, I think, or the hindrance or the pullback has been around, if we do get all of these people, all of a sudden, where are we going to house them? Because we don't have the houses. So what we are doing is really working with businesses that have job opportunities open to start using this toolkit. So it's not going to be launched as a campaign. It hasn't been launched as a campaign. It is a toolbox. And we will be working with those businesses ready to list for vacant jobs to get it in the first instance. And then we'll work along with the councils, with our businesses, about how we can support them to gain traction for this. This is a campaign that will be used over a number of years, and the ability for it to be contextualized into any different situation is really, really great. So I'm not sure if the councillors have seen these seen this presentation, but what we're kind of like saying is really promoting our way of life and our the opportunities we have in our beautiful region. So get a life. So less time being in traffic and more time being in the great outdoors. I'm sick of all this fresh air, said no one ever. So therefore, get a life and get Southland, because that's what we have an abundance of. So it really is and it can be, any of this visual imagery can be personalized to a business. Even with SIT, that's something that we spoke about. How do you use this for you in your recruitment campaign, especially overseas? Because it is really about our region and what we have to offer. Not only a good job and prospects, but a beautiful, well-balanced lifestyle. And this is my final sort of part, Net Zero Southland. As you know, the energy strategy was developed, and we also had the decarbonisation workshops and the sustainable tourism programs, as I've mentioned there. In addition to that, we have also worked with some of our stakeholders, including Thriving Southland, to look at the land diversification tours. We've supported the medicinal cannabis crop farmers with some investigations and some information. And Bobby, Steve and Kelly, they went up to Northland earlier in the year on a project that was to invoke collaboration between EDAs across the country to come up with solutions possibly to common threads of areas. So for us, it was Southland, Taranaki, Northland. Those are the 3 EDAs?
Timaru.
And Timaru, sorry, 4 EDAs, and then we invited Thriving Southland to come along for it. And so the group of people will come down to Southland, Invercargill in August, isn't it? In August, yeah, there we go. Data and dashboards we mentioned above, so the final one is about the carbon emissions reduction. So we've had 3-day workshops and a 1-day workshop. We've hosted, the Community Trust is supporting not-for-profit charitable organizations, and we had 2 of those events hosted by us. We've had one-on-one technical support meetings with the businesses that have come into those workshops and held a sustainable tourism webinar. There'll be another one held shortly. I think it's scheduled for July this year. July this year, yeah. And yeah, so just supporting some of the final implementations of boiler replacements that we had over a period of years through the IDC and the GIDI Fund. And of course, as you know, all of that funding is coming to an end. So this will be the last set of support that we could provide. ICA has announced that their focus will be more on an outreach model. So we're just working with them to see what that will look like and see if there's opportunity for Southland to be engaged with them. So that's pretty it. That's pretty much it. I'm open for questions.
And of course, we've got the PY News as well, provided a lot of certainty for the region for 20 years, so that's quite good. And I guess it's the outcome that the Beyond 25 plan was finally waiting for. So
yes, definitely.
Thank you for that update and report. Are there any questions from the quiet bunch today?
Through you, Your Worship. Thanks for the report, Shami. Predominantly positive, but that stat around the 18 to do with the jobs for youth, the Job Seeker Youth Initiative, where 18 uptake and then a greater percentage were actually not ready. That's representative of Southland for that particular age group overall. I'm presuming that's a snapshot of how we're looking, so that's a real concern.
Yeah.
If we're to try and achieve all of the initiatives associated with Great South, and now and into the future, to me that's once again it's a spotlight that we really, really need to focus on, right? Because without that youth element being ready or being trained properly, or whatever the underlying issues are, and you alluded to them, and I'm sure that they're varied in many, that's a real problem.
Mm-hmm.
Well, that's one of the things. Like prior to doing the Mayor's Task Force job, we didn't actually know what that need was. So, like part of the process is actually identified and given us some sort of, I guess, measurable data around the picture that we've got.
And our suspicions were probably always there.
Yeah.
Some issues based on previous data, and I'm certainly not discrediting the process to go through to get the data to confirm what our suspicions were. The big question is, what do we do next? So, yeah.
Well, that's one of the benefits of that Mayor's Task Force program, is that actually it delivers sort of pastoral care and support to get those people work ready. So they're not just we don't just get the stat and go, they're not ready. The process of that is getting them into that next phase of work ready, and then we've got 8 outcomes already. So and then getting them into work. So those 8 people, I'm going to make a high level assumption here, but wouldn't be in work right now had this program not happened. So it's moving people through that.
And I suppose conversely, you know, to balance the argument out, it is encouraging and refreshing to see, did you say 48 businesses have come on board in order to be able to go, well, we do have an issue here, we do, you know, we are prepared to help out in that particular space. So, I mean, that's a real positive.
We appreciate your question also, Tom, and thank you for raising that, because it is one of the areas that the councillors can support us with as well, because you've got your individual networks. The more you know about the program, and I'm quite happy to come through with Renata, who is the lead, to talk about, or even Liz, the person who's on the ground doing the work, talking about some of those issues, talking about some of the programs that we're doing to support them to overcome them. There's anxiety, there's mental health issues, there's deprivation, there's a whole range of things. So each one has to be treated as an individual and a plan put forward for that individual. What that may look like is quite varied. Since this program has started, we've identified, especially from the schools, people who would have just fallen from the school system but not gone into work or not gone on a benefit as well are there. So there's very capable people, and that's why we've had such a high number of work-ready people that could be progressed into jobs. But sometimes it's just overcoming that shyness. With this project, we do have support for the employers, but we also, as deliverers of the contract, we will have regular touch points with the employee and the client that ensures that they're getting up to work, they're going to work every day. There are not, barriers for transport, barriers for understanding what's going on within the workplace. You know, all of those little things, so that regular contact is there for, I think it's about 6 months. And then, we're confident that they should, it's not 6 months, sorry, it's 3 months. And then we should be confident that they can continue on, and the employers confident that they can continue on as well. So a sustainable outcome, and Mayor Rob alluded to an outcome, is that a person is in a job for a period of time, 3 months or over. So getting them into that regular employment, getting them into employment that continues and is regular for them will bring stability to their life, and they can start seeing the changes that they can make. And that was the whole concept behind Mayor's Task Force for Jobs. So really hats off to Mayor Rob for getting it, because if the Mayor hadn't said that he wanted to support it, we wouldn't have got it in our region. So it's a great initiative. It is a lot of work, but we have some really good people that we have employed for this particular contract that understand youth and have worked in that space before. So it's really, I'm sure that we'll be coming back with a lot of success stories. But from the councillor's point of view, if you could, within your own networks, talk to people, employers that you know that could support us, and any employer or business that you may know that might want to support you to progress in their careers, then please do let us know. That's something that we would really appreciate. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, so just thinking about that group, that cohort, as a percentage of that age group, what, or the rest, there'll be a lot of them still at school, there'll be some, or a lot of them are already in work. Do we know what percentage that represents?
Not yet. We need to, I think we haven't been a year into this, or even 6 months into it, really. Once we get to a position, we are collecting data and we'll be able to report back on that. From schools, historically, we've been told that most of the numbers will come out in term 3 or 4. Some people will stay on until year 12 and they finish the exams. Most of them will end with the rugby season ending and sports season ending. So, between term 3 and term 4, we expect a lot more to come on, so that we can get a rough figure and do a calculation based on student roll and the numbers that we get at the end of the year.
There's a comparison to the numbers that were seen in the NEET statistics. That will be a good one.
Yeah, definitely. We'll do some work on that and bring that back here.
Any other questions? quite much today. Thanks you too. Really appreciate the update once again and all the work that you're doing. It's really appreciated. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Vero.
Look forward to you coming back next time.
Thank you very much. Thank you for having us. Have a good afternoon.
Hey, I don't know if Fiona's got to, but I will take us back to where we're up to, which is 711, which is road stopping for 2 Norris Road and on page 295. I'm Kevin and sorry, I'm Wendy. Megan, sorry. I'll go through a whole list of names and I'll get one of them right one. Thanks, sorry, Megan.
And good afternoon to you all. I will take this report as read. As described in the report, I'm asking you to make a decision on whether or not to stop a portion of a paper road in the Lautha area and then for that stopped area of road to be transferred to the adjoining landowner. The reasoning for the road stopping and then the land transfer is in order to resolve a long and complex set of negotiations for an easement registration on private land for the Around the Mountain cycle trail. The landowner concerned has agreed to the easement facility on the proviso that it can be exchanged for a portion of paper road that bisects their property. In order to do that, Council firstly has to consent to allow staff to start the road stopping process. There is the ability to use the Public Works Act 1981 to close the road. However, that requires the approval of the Minister, and that will be sought if Council agrees to proceed. Are there any questions that we can answer for you?
Thanks, Amy. Just one from me, and so look, it's cutting off a section of paper road. There's a bit on either side of it. Are there any implications for that sort of, I guess, orphaned piece of paper road?
No, it doesn't form a network, and Hartley here has said that he has no use for the road.
Are there any other questions from the?
So what's the difference between unformed paper roads versus unformed paper roads that are around a coast or around a hydro parcel like a river? I know that in this case, further back to the south of what the map's indicating, that road reserve that continues down through to the bridge is bordering the hydro parcel of the earthing or the Atkins district. But of course, the river's changed path from the original survey, from where the survey of the hydro parcel is. So, is there a difference in terms of road stopping when you're talking about proposed unformed roads versus paper roads that are following a river or a coastal area? Is there a different process between them?
The status of the land is no different. It's a road. Unformed road. Doesn't matter whether it's formed or unformed, it's a road. The difference relates to what happens if the road is stopped. If it's along the edge of the sea or a lake or a stream or a river, it becomes a local purpose reserve esplanade. If it's not along the waterway, it just becomes a piece of freehold land able to be disposed of. In this particular case here, the bit between Ellis Road up to the south boundary is along the edge of the waterway. That's being retained. It's not intended to be dealt with because that piece of land still will be providing the public access along the edge of that waterway. Where the stop road starts, it's not adjoining, therefore it's not used for that access to that public recreation area.
That makes sense. Cheers.
Any other questions from the? There being none, I'll take us to our recommendations. So we're recommending that staff initiate the road stopping process under the Public Works Act 1981 and determines the council will supply to the Minister of Lands written consent of 2 Ellis Road, Lowbit, and determines that if the road stopping application to the Minister of Lands is successful, to transfer the stop road to the adjoining landowner in lieu of compensation for an easement facility for the around the mountain cycle trail. Someone in a position to move? Councillor Ruttenclaw, do we have a seconder? Councillor Barker-Roy? No further discussion. If not, I'll put the motion. All those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Anybody against? Carried. Thanks, Megan, and apologies for getting your name wrong. Thanks, Kevin. Right, item 7.12. This is the Canberra Downs 301, getting towards the end of our agenda now. Welcome, Phil, to the table.
Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. Through your worship, I'll take the report as being read and happy to answer any questions.
I guess this is another implication of the long-term plan delay, where there's been a lot of projects that were kind of scheduled to go off and are falling in there, and this one is needing to be done sooner due to time constraints, so
yeah,
it's sort of pushed forward.
At the moment, the current lake level is 201.79 metres, and if it gets up to a metre above that or 900 mils above that, then we're probably not going to be able to undertake it. So it's at the low range at the moment, and with the winter generation, if we do get a lot of rain, Meridian are going to store and it'll go up. So, and then if we don't get a chance to get it done until early spring, when the snow melt, spring rain, to get it done before Christmas and have it out of service over the busy Christmas period, pushes us post-Christmas. Construction costs could go up, contractor availability. It just complicates the whole thing. There's no guarantee that we'll get it done, even if you do agree to this, but it does give us the best opportunity to be able to do so. We can't control the weather or Meridian generation, but this is the best way that we can see forward to the best crack at it.
Certainly in favour of getting this done as soon as possible.
Absolutely, absolutely. And just quickly, it's one of the very few projects that isn't in year 4 of the LTP that gets caught up into the situation. So that's why we've put this one. That couldn't wait until at least the adoption of the LTP. So our apologies for having to do that, but there's good reason for this one having to jump ahead of the rest of the program.
So it's an acceleration of the project as opposed to an unbudgeted expense per se.
That makes good sense to me. Are there any other questions from the...
Just one, Your Worship, if you have a run of clear weather, how much time do you need for this to be done?
We'll need about a 6-week construction window once the contract's been awarded. If we direct engage a contractor, it'll probably still take 4 to 6 weeks to get them underway by the time they get reinforcing bent up materials in place. If we go through the tender process, it could take 8 to 10 weeks. So we would be probably preferring to direct engage the local contractor who's got a proven track record. He's got the gear to do it. He's got the sheet piles. He's done Manapuri last year, the other two in Tiana the year before that, and we just direct engage him and get it underway.
Thank you.
Sounds like it's all under control.
Get that weather 6 weeks. Yeah, this is great.
No mail for 6 weeks.
There's no further discussion.
Sorry, through your worship. Yeah, I think this is probably a fairly straightforward thing to go ahead with. Just with regards to the resource consent expiring in May 2025, if there was a worst case scenario where none of this could be realised and we were getting close to that consent expiring, do we then have to go back into a situation where we have to reapply for a resource consent, go through the same thing all over again, and then potentially be delayed for a year or two?
If we give them 6 months' notice that it could be coming to expiry, we just have to get it renewed. But if we let it expire without notification, we'll have to go straight through the process again.
And typically for a resource consent to get that extension, it needs to actually show that there has been work underway or being done. So we do have to show some traction.
Right, okay, no, fair enough, that's all.
Thanks. We don't find ourselves in that.
Yeah, hopefully not.
So I'm happy to move those recommendations from the chair. Do we have a second to Councillor O'Brien? If there's no further discussion, I'll the motion. All those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Anybody against? That is carried. Thank you, Phil.
Thank you.
On with the work now. Right, moving right along. 7.13, the proposed update to the delegations menu. It's on page 305 of your agenda, and I'll welcome the Cal at the table. Betty again, welcome back.
Thank you, Worship. Just very quickly from my side, it should be a standard practice that when we require delegations change for a variety of reasons, we bring it through to you and you approve those change of delegations. So that's what that report is about, and it's suggesting a few changes there. And I'll pass it to Nicola if you want to add something to that.
Thank you, Fabuti. The details of the proposed amendments are all outlined in the report. They fall into largely three sections. Firstly, Chief Executive delegations that have been made since the last update adopted by Council in January, and that includes one typographical correction. An amendment to the delegations to the Stewart Island Akura Visitor Levy Subcommittee, and then amendments to and new RMA delegations. The RMA amendments are to improve the drafting of sections 39AA to 42 and to remove some duplication of roles across those sections. The new RMA delegations all relate to national directions to make changes to plans when there is no opportunity not to implement those directions. These delegations are for sections 44, 55(2) and 58I. The recommendations relating to this report are on page 306. Happy to answer any questions.
Thanks, Michael. In terms of those last ones that you talked about in particular, so at the moment it would come to council for a decision, so we get informed about it. So if it's being delegated to staff, is there a way that we can still find out about anything that's important in terms of the information or the decision that's being made for those sorts of?
Yes, there would be a way an information report could come to council for those sections if that's what was desired.
Are there any other questions from the council members?
Thank you, Your Worship. Yeah, I've got some concerns around particularly these limits, which we agreed at the start of the year, and now it's the request that they go from $100,000 to $500,000. I understood that those limits were in place for the protection of everyone, including the staff. I'm not sure that I'm convinced that they're necessary.
Generally speaking, so Your Worship, wherever there are capital expenditures in particular, it's not unusual to see a $500,000 limit there. However, it is, of course, at the council's discretion. What it will do is it'll hold up some things for you. So, where you set those limits is up to you, but obviously relevant budget holders have felt that there is that need to have that approval at that level. I'm speaking more generically unless you have something more specific.
Through you, Your Worship, the only thing I would add is those delegations have already been given by the Chief Executive. So they're coming to council for council's approval of that. So, but obviously there is a process that could happen if council was unhappy with those to become new figures that are delegated from council.
It may be worth just a little explanation around that particular one. So that's for the group manager, customer and community wellbeing, which the reason for that is there's a lot of obviously infrastructure related projects that also with the community resources team being in that team, wharves that are expensive and so on. So there are some reasons why. So remembering that the budgets will have been set, it will be a project that has been determined by council as an appropriate project. It's actually just getting on and doing them. So in this case, it would be appropriate for that role to have that level of delegation.
Oh, that makes a bit more sense. Yeah, so it's not something that's going to happen outside of the council process. It's just the signing off part.
Correct.
So we'll have all the. Sorry, Councillor.
Thanks, Your Worship. I understand that there'll be contracts within budget, but quite often we have requests come to the council for funding outside, over and above budgets. And I think this just increases the possibility that there could be some, well, much bigger surprises coming through. And for the sake of getting a signature from the chief executive, who is supposed to have oversight, particularly over big expenses like this. For me, I don't think it's a tall order for him, big ask for him signing off on $500,000.
Just with that keyword in there, though, Councillor, just questioning your question on the approved budget. So the budget would have to be approved by council before it gets signed. So am I understanding that, including unbudgeted? So there's no sort of side door mechanism to do it. It's still council would still approve it, if I understand that
Correct. The project will have had to have been approved, either in a long-term plan, an annual plan, or an unbudgeted expenditure report will have come to council. You will have approved that work to be carried out, and it's essentially allowing us to get on and do that work.
So would a live example be our previous item with those jetty and Te Anau?
Correct.
So we've just approved for that to happen. So
yes. So it allows us to get on and do the contractual arrangements to get that underway.
So if that delegation wasn't there, so if that was say $200,000 and we didn't approve this, does that need to come back to council then?
No, it would just have to go all the way through with the chief executive. It would go to the chief executive. But it just means a lot more contracts would end up going to the chief executive for him to have the capacity to be able to sign them off.
So, to your worship, your delegations manual only delegates expenditure that you have or any plans that you have approved. So it cannot be outside of your budgeting that you have set up. And that is the delegation you give to your chief executive, and the chief executive then delegates it down. So to that process that Fran just mentioned, depending on what level of delegations are set, you have given your delegation to the chief executive to implement whatever you've got in your plans. So that is set. It just depends on how much administrative burden you want to put on your chief executive that he approves to what level or how much he can delegate down. So this is saying he delegates down to 1 GM, that particular level. And I'd mentioned right at the start that it's not unusual to see wherever there's infrastructure that you'd see it at sitting at about that level so they can go ahead and do their contractual obligations. So that you're not delegating anything outside of your planning process.
And it potentially makes it more efficient as well in terms of speeding up the process. Are any further questions, Councillor Duffy?
Oh, just a comment. We do have a problem with uncompleted contracts, uncompleted projects because of the speed that we do things. So I think something that's within our original approvals that actually helps speed that up must be an advantage.
Yeah, I'm not sure that we have a problem with the speed of spending money.
Oh, look at the reports every year we do.
Look at the plan for the next 10 years.
Well, let's hope we get the next lot spent in that year.
We'll keep it on this report. Any further questions? Councillor Wilson, you've done that breathe, but am I misreading that one again? Cool. Well, if there's no further discussion, we've got the recommendations here, so I'll just go through from D, approving the following amendments. alterations to delegations made by the CE since the manual was adopted in January, changing the financial delegations to the group manager, customer and community wellbeing by increasing the limit authority to authorise purchases of capital items or goods and services within relevant council approved budgets from 100 to 500,000, and increasing the limit for authority to enter into contracts, full value of contract within approved budgets, and accept tenders for asset disposal from 100 to 200. And increasing the authority to authorise awarded contracts from 100 to 500,000, and altering the delegation given to particular staff roles under section 348 of the Local Government Act to create and cancel right of ways, removing the delegation to general manager, strategy and partnerships and team leader environmental policy, and making a new delegation to team leader consent processing. Just a question on that one, is the Local Government Act 1974 still relevant? So it's not 2002? So for that one, the minor typographical amendment and amending the delegation for the Stewart Island Riviera Visibility Allocation Subcommittee by removing the delegation to set policy in relation to the collection and enforcement of the levy to ensure the manual has a consistent position that only council can set policy. And I won't read out all those numbers and jargon unless someone wants me to. Do we have someone?
If I may interrupt here, could I inquire if all the other GMs, what is their authority for the amount?
100,000.
So we are changing this for the GM customer and community wellbeing. Do I assume all the others already are at $500,000?
No, so I'm at $1 million and the other GMs are 100.
Yeah, I'm at 100,000.
So you're the only GM who's at $1 million?
Yes, I'm the only one at $1 million, and I'm the chief executive, unlimited, obviously. But obviously, the difference is the amount of bridges and different things. The more expensive the projects are. So.
Are you happy to move, Councillor Dodson?
No, I'm not. I'm not
So
actually. I've been thinking suddenly that's a big jump, and from 100,000 to $500,000. And I wondered what happened if the chief executive is signing off on other amounts, for other GMs, then why not this one? That's probably where I was asking the question, going for the consistency.
I could give a bit more explanation if you need.
I think Anne wanted to chip in.
I was just probably going to say the same thing that Fran was. It's just in regards to previously that would have just been the customer service area.
Right.
So of course it would have only been 100,000, but with the change in structure and the role that was created, they just hadn't realised that, of course, it took on the community facilities and that sort of area, which had higher contractual arrangements with it. So hence the reason why there would be a higher.
So it also has the standard component. So it's actually been created because of the change in the structure. Matt, who used to be in the role before myself, had the delegation, but also had that department within the team. So when it moved through the structure to a different team, those responsibilities have also moved. So at the moment, it either they have to come all to me or to the chief executive to deal with those dollars. Right. So it's more appropriate that that GM has the right level for the responsibility that they're after.
I'm happy to move it on, Rob.
Cool. I guess this is just the nature of this being it's been mentioned just before, this is a live document that gets regularly updated as the organisation ebbs and flows. So, seconded by Councillor Ravenclaw. I'll put the motion. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Anybody against?
Aye.
Councillor Byers? That is carried. Thank you, everyone.
Do you want the thinking vote?
Thank you, work on that team. All right, item 7.14, the representation review update. So this is on page 319 of your agenda, and I'll welcome Robin up and Val.
Thank you, Richard. I'm actually going to let Robin carry on with this. You've been through the process for a while, as have a lot of councils, because it's a six-yearly, at least a 6-yearly review. So I know it'll have had history.
Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. So this report is to provide information to Council on the engagement that's been undertaken on representation in the district, and also to outline the feedback that's been received from the community. This report also provides information on the representation arrangement that staff intend to present as the initial proposal at the council meeting on 16 July. So to provide a brief summary, staff intend to present an initial proposal similar to current representation arrangements, but with ward and community board boundary changes near Nightcaps, Drummond, Taramoa, in the Hokanui Hills and at Nokamai. So staff also intend to present that macrons be included in 3 of the ward or board names, which is Oriti, Oraka and Wahapai. So staff are keen to receive feedback from councillors at this stage in the process, as we're keen to ensure that their proposal presented on 16 July aligns with council's desired approach. So following the adoption of initial proposal on 16 July, staff will complete a thorough consultation process, run hearings for those who wish to speak, present a final proposal for adoption, and then also lodge the proposal with the Local Government Commission for it to make a final decision on representation arrangements. So I'll hand it back over to you.
I've got a question, probably better offline, but I'll ask it now. Anyway, but I was just talking to a ratepayer the other day, and they've got property straddling Gore and us. So is this the type of process that would be used to potentially, and can, I guess in this process, can you amend a boundary between districts to make it more relevant for this person that's paying rates between 2 different council areas?
Yeah, go. Sorry, I was just going to say, boundary changes between councils is not usually a representation review process. This is more about, representation from your people. Boundary changes is a different process that needs to be followed. Just having been on the boundary of Hamilton and Waikato, and they did a boundary change, so that's where I'm coming from.
But this was an interesting scenario, talking to that ratepayer that pays rates to 2 different councils on essentially one property. Are there any other questions from the floor? Councillor Wilson?
It's kind of aligned actually with what you've just mentioned, because I'm assuming that falls outside a representation review, but is more under reorganisation of local government and council boundary. The only thing I noted in this report is that there was discussion in regards to the representation review at the working group, plus also at least at the Ardlassa Community Board, there was questions around what does that other process look like. So outside of just the internal SDC representation review, what does a bigger picture of representation in terms of reorganisation process look like? There was comment of some process, maybe part 2 of the Local Government Act or Schedule 2 or something, and it's a petition elective process. Just wondering whether more information in terms of public consultation will get put out there to find out what community sentiment is as far as boundary change and that level. Is this a consultation process that in this 6-yearly review at least a question could be put out there to the community of beyond within the district representation review, what else do you see for the future and what can that look like? Because it came up, like I say, at the working group, I don't know if I'd quite say unanimously, but it appeared to be an appetite for more information around what a process like that looks like. I just don't know where to go from there other than self-research and looking at the Local Government Act myself. Like, there seems to be options and opportunities of how to determine if there are any movements in that area. But I guess it's in response to the local government review. This internal representation review hasn't really considered what the future may be in light of that wider picture.
I think I can sort of answer that from my point of view. I've been having over the last sort of probably 2 or 3 weeks having discussions with the chief executive around that exact thing as to, like, that doesn't really fall in this process, but we do need to start having a look at that sort of bigger picture of what Southland needs to look like going forward, irrespective of existing patches and boundaries and everything like that. So yeah, I'm looking at what kind of piece of work we could do. So yeah, the wheels are in motion, I guess, to answer your question in terms of, so you don't have to do it on your own, but yeah, I'll bring something.
Well, it's this process has basically determined that within our community right now, there's not a big appetite for major representation changes within the status quo, but there may be quite a big appetite for a bigger, wider change in general, which unfortunately this review, because it's not looking at that wide scope, doesn't quite weed that information out of it. But yeah, future information and I guess curiosity to ask the question to the community of where to next.
Section 24 of the Local Government Act is quite interesting, as well as Schedule 3.
Darren.
Following on from what Matt said, I think the general feel is we don't want to tinker too much with this because we know there's a bigger change that needs to be looked at. That was the sentiment I picked up at in that committee, and so just to support that notion of obviously putting some stuff in place. So, yeah.
Any further questions? Councillor Keys?
Just a couple of minor errors, probably, or minor things. I don't know whether page 321, number 8, I think that should read the district as a whole, at large. Councillors are elected by wards at large, and it's got in brackets, at the district.
As a while.
As a while. So it needs to be as a whole. Page 328, I think the date should probably be 10th April 2025. And page 343, spelling of Neil. I looked at it a little bit. It might well be. It was enough. I wrote it down. So.
Whereabouts in 343?
Oh,
yeah,
otherwise I've got around the wrong way.
Trying to accuse us of not reading our agendas.
I was waiting for Paul to do it.
Is there anything else? Cool. Thank you for that. So we've got our recommendations there on page 320. So we are noting that the community reviews engagement process undertaken in November 23. We note the 4 representation options generated by staff in response to community feedback. So the existing structure, minor changes to the existing structure, reducing the number of boards in Wallerstown. We note the feedback received on the 4 representation options. We note that staff intend to present an initial proposal to Council on the 16th of July 2024. It proposes the following minor changes to the current representation arrangement: minor ward and community board boundary changes near Nightcaps, Drummond, Taramoa, the Hokinui Hills and Nokamai, and minor changes to the board notes to include appropriate backgrounds. Do we have someone in a position to move? Councillor by Price, seconded by Councillor Fraser. I'll put the motion. All those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Anybody against? That is carried. Thank you. I guess just acknowledging that working group as well. It's been meeting and doing really good work for that. All right, the next item on the agenda is the employment report. The last item on the agenda, so no pressure on me to fill in the time. I'll take it as read. It's been a very, very busy couple of months, a few trips to Wellington, but very productive as well. Getting out in the community, recognising the good community service of our volunteers in the community. It's a really fun part of the job. There's so many people out there doing good work behind the scenes, so it's great to be able to do that as well. And yeah, I'll open up for any questions if anybody's got anything, and if any councillors want to report on anything that they've been up to and the extensive activities that you do out and about as well, feel free. Mr. Hand.
See, talk about get a life, and that's what you're out there doing. I'll just report on creative communities. We had a meeting in Winton and allocated to 11 applications. We committee had a look around the murals of Winton, which was a really great day, and next journey is down to Julie's piece of the world. So get a life and have a wee journey down there. I want to acknowledge Keith Cowie for all the work that she did around the meeting. Unfortunately, she was unable to be with us, but I just want to thank her. It was great, and that's me.
Thank you. Anything further, Councillor Geest?
Thank you. Yes, it's been a pleasure to be here. I just wanted to comment on through Whakamanati Waituna Trust that I received letter from Whanga thanking us very much for getting the upgrade to the bridge completed. So that allows a whole lot of other work to start flowing through because they can get across the bridge. So yeah, they're very appreciative of that. So it's good work. It was a good thing to finally get it done. Great. Thanks for the stuff.
Councillor Runcorn.
It's Rob again. Sorry, as a trustee for Arts Murahiku, I just want to tell everybody that the inaugural Southland Art Awards are on at the Escott on the 17th of August. It's a cabaret theme, it's a feast for Southland, there's 8 award categories. Maybe an opportunity for a get-together ourselves around the table. But just thought I'd put it out there. I'll send some information through, get it out to community boards and look for people that could be up for some of these awards. Specifically one that I pushed for was youth. So I'll send some information out and about. We've got a very short time frame now, so we'll talk about it. That would be great. Thanks.
Councillor Duffy.
Yes, so the Regional Heritage, we actually meet on the 11th of July, but we picked up $125,000 worth of funding towards the Project Arc from lotteries just lately, which was very good because the pool of money they had a huge number of applications, so we did better than our share, if you like. The Regional Heritage Building and Preservation Trust, so that trust, which was set up to give interest-free loans to private owners of heritage buildings, has come to the end of its purpose. But we did manage to gain along the way 2 properties in Southland District, one being Kawi Cottage in Riverton, and the other one, the mine, Sinclair's Mine and Cottage in Nightcaps. So the Kawi Cottage is being handed over to a local trust in Riverton, and that's after a lot of money was spent restoring it through grants and funding from that committee. And so just now the Sinclair's Mine and Cottage in Nightcaps is being listed for sale, and we're going to exit that due to probably lack of community interest in taking it on. The coal mine, we're doing a great job helping with maintenance and so on, but given that their tenure is coming to an end, they aren't doing any more. So we were devising ways that perhaps even an STC could have taken it over, but that's moved away from that now. So if you want a wee cottage in Nightcaps, opportunity.
So did you want the cottage? Or
Better have some,
Better
have some candles in a chamber pot.
No, what I just want to add was the archives at Tutapri. I've alerted them to the Sinclair Cottage, and they're going to be getting in touch to see there is some archival material that they might be interested in before it gets listed.
I see.
So they'll be getting in touch with you.
Good. Thanks, just brief. One issue with the Sinclair Mining Cottage was not so much the cottage, but the contents.
Yes, and that's what.
So, looking to talk to people about where they might be housed.
Your Worship, thank you for that. I may or may not put you on the spot here or not, but probably a question for you and Cameron. When you met with Milford Opportunities in Queenstown, and there was a report, I think, given by the central government ministers around the Milford Opportunity Initiative. Do we have any sort of feedback from that in terms of where we're going?
That's probably a question for Cameron. I didn't actually meet in Queenstown, Cameron, but I think my rough understanding is a decision imminent in the journey, so what the next steps will be, I don't think I've looked in. out there at the moment. I don't think anyone here knows. Oh, Adrian, what?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, yeah, they've been in touch with myself and previously Michael Aiken a couple of times just to update us on their plans, but as you indicate, end of June still their target date to ask us what they want more from us. So they are in touch with us, but it's not been frequent. But we are, engaging where they ask us to do.
Well, if there's no further questions or feedback there, I will move from the chair that report is accepted. I will second it. Councillor Button, call. All those in favour, please say aye. Cool, that is carried. Thank you very much, everyone, and right on time, I can close the meeting. And I will do the closing karakia before 3 o'clock. Kia hora, te marino, kia whakapapa, whanamu, te moana, hei hurahi, mā tātou I te rangi nei, aroha atu,
Aroha mai, tātou I a tātou katoa, I tai ki e.
May peace be widespread, may the sea be like greenstone, a pathway for us all this day, let us show respect for each other, for one another, bind us all together. Thank you, everybody. That was a very good meeting.
Thank you. Sorry, just the live program, I'm not sure how many people are aware of that. The graduation's tomorrow in Gore, and I can't go now because of the Poe ceremony, and Rob, I guess you can't go. Were you notified about it this time?
I've got an email at 10:50 today, so that was my first contact.